Political Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know, I'm your humble host, the Y'all Mean the Revolution. And I understand y'all enjoying family and friends right now, celebrating y'all holidays. Salute to y'all, but World War III is still going on. Let's not lose sight of that. Before we get into that, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. Like, share, subscribe, support the platform, y'all. Well, Putin the Great offered a Christmas truce. Putin the Great offered them, opportunity to just relax on Christmas and think about where they went wrong. But Ukraine did not want to go along with that, and now they woke up to a bunch of pain and suffering. Let's get right into it.
Well, indeed, it is a large-scale attack that hit Ukraine last night. It was a combined, hybrid attack of missiles and drones. And you've mentioned the city of Kharkiv was heavily hit last night. Several ballistic missiles, according to Mayor Igor Terehov, struck this city, mainly the energy infrastructure that was hit once again, and not just in Kharkiv, but also in Kremenchuk, in Dnipro, and in Kryvyi Rih. And you had mentioned it. Kryvyi Rih was already struck yesterday by a missile, which killed one person, injured another dozen people there. And the Minister of Energy, Herman Halushenko, already talked this morning about yet another attack against the energy infrastructure. He also said that there would be across the country major power cuts installed so as to prevent the energy system to collapse, an energy system that has already been heavily hit after successive attacks launched by Russia the past months, the past weeks. So it's a very difficult Christmas morning here for Ukrainians.
Indeed, we can hear the church bells ringing in the background there, Manuel. But you've just come back from the Donetsk and the Dnipro regions.
Putin offered them a Christmas truce for the kids. Zelensky, the cokehead, disrespected Putin, cussed him out. Zelensky said he was going to let his missiles do the talking. Ha ha ha. Oh, really? Did y'all know the other day, President Putin the Great, this is what he said on TV. He told the West, he said, this is the first time in history since the old days of the Wild West where you challenge a man to a duel. You say, meet me at high noon. That's true. President Putin told NATO, what he going to do is he want them to put their best air defense systems. I mean, the best they got, the best. Anywhere in Ukraine, just put them somewhere in Ukraine. He say, put your best shit. He say, then I'm going to attack that place. You put your air defense systems, and we're going to let the whole world know who really bluffing and who really doing what they're supposed to be doing and who can't be stopped. That man told the West that. And ever since then, he just been showing them that he's going to hit whatever he want to hit, and they're going to pay for it.
What's the situation there, both in terms of military and life for residents?
Well, the situation is very difficult on the eastern front line. We know that Russians keep on...
But really what Putin was telling them is, if I tell you put your advanced air defense system somewhere in Ukraine and you can't stop me, it's not just in Ukraine you're not going to be able to stop me in. It's a message he's giving them. You're not going to be able to stop me in your homeland when the time comes.
Advancing towards the Pokrovsk sector, and I was there at the rear of that region in Donetsk, of that area, and you can see that there are still thousands of civilians who are trapped in the war zone. It is estimated that over 50,000 civilians are still living there, so they are exposed to continuous shelling, to bombing. They are really there. They have no electricity, no running water, no heating. It's very cold right now in Ukraine. I was in a transit center at the rear of that area where you can see people arriving every day. It's usually elderly people, people who never thought they would leave their home one day, and simply people who don't know where to go. They don't have the financial means to resettle. That's often why they stay so long. Also because some of the elderly people I talked to who are there, they've lived all their lives in one one place. They've never traveled elsewhere. They simply don't know where to go. They only do so when the situation is no longer tenable, when really there's no other option. And this is the humanitarian situation.
Why did y'all listen to Zelensky? Putin offered y'all Christmas Day truce. Zelensky gave him the finger, cussed him out like the cokehead that he is. You got to overthrow Zelensky if you ever want to be warm again. You want to sleep in your bed, you got to stop Zelensky, or this will never stop. It'll rain missiles forever.
Right now in that area, very dire. You have people who decided to stay as well. Often if it is to stay with those of the people who cannot leave, so the families of people with disabilities, with elderly people, but we see that the situation is very dire there at the moment.
Oh, lady, why the hell did y'all disrespect Putin when he offered you a Christmas Day truce? You could be decking the halls, you know, fa la 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 la, all that shit. You could be singing Silent Night. Oh, what a quiet night, you know. You could be singing Joy to the World, that type of shit, but you're not. You're hiding out. You're in a bunker. Your president, Zelensky, is on that coat. He hiding out. He's scared to death. But it didn't have to be like this. They didn't have to wake up on Christmas. And Christmas is not on December the 25th in Ukraine. Let's remember that. Orthodox, Russian religion, Orthodox. It's on January the 7th. See, that's another message from Putin. Zelensky switched Christmas to the 25th to embrace the West. So this is another Putin giving him a bold slap to the face. Bitch, Christmas is on January 27th in Orthodox, their religion, Orthodox Christianity. So you let them know they ain't got nothing to celebrate.
A security camera in Kharkiv captures the sound of explosions just after 6 a.m. on Christmas Day, as Russian missiles and drones targeted the Ukrainian city and beyond.
Putin deliberately chose Christmas to attack. What could be more inhumane? More than 70 missiles, including ballistic missiles, and more than 100 attack drones. The target is our energy infrastructure.
Kharkiv wasn't the only target. While Ukrainian air defense said it shot down over 50 missiles, other cities were badly hit. Russia has targeted Ukraine's energy system since the winter of 2022, hoping to use the region's bitter winter to put pressure on Kyiv. The Christmas strikes make it the 13th attack on Ukraine's power grid this year. Energy firms applied preventive outages across the country to prevent strain on the system, leaving some areas without power as ordinary Ukrainians scrambled for safety, including in the capital.
I'm scared because I have a child. Of course, I want to be at home and celebrate, but we had to shelter because it's scary to stay at home. So we came to the shelter. We just want peace.
I only feel hostility, nothing else. I am very angry that this is how people have to spend their mornings, their holidays. It's also very sad. We hope for something better and that it'll be over soon.
Man, this will never stop till you get rid of Zelensky.
Ukraine is celebrating Christmas on the 25th for the second time this year. Christian Orthodox countries usually mark the occasion on January 7th, though the government changed the date last year.
See how disrespectful that is to Putin? So for the second year, they celebrating Christmas today, which is not today. It's on the January the 7th for Orthodox Christianity over there in their part of the world. You see, this is about destroying the people's culture. And Putin ain't going for it. So he letting them know, y'all just stay in bunkers and stay in shelters today. Ain't nothing to celebrate. You understand that? Won't be no unwrapping no gifts in Ukraine today. I didn't say that. That's what the missiles were saying.
Last year, in a move to further reduce Russian influence and stop Moscow.
Salute. Yeah, I didn't mind if they unwrapped presents or shit like that today. But seems like Putin not going for it. Not today. Today, you got to be in your bunker. You know. Miss Claus, she hiding out too. You feel me? Mr. Claus, you know Santa Claus is today in Ukraine.
That came under attack. According to another report, this area, Kiev, was also hit. But these are the two primarily was hit by Russian attack drones and also missiles. Now let's take a look at the other map here real quick. This map, you can see Romania and Moldova. There are two countries here, Moldova and Romania. Now why these two countries I'm mentioning is because recently when Russia launched these missile attacks on Ukraine, you can imagine Moscow or Russia is right here. Nevertheless, the Romanian authorities and the Moldovan authorities, they are now accusing Russia of violating their airspace. So both Moldova and Romania, they're accusing Russia of violating the airspace of those two countries. How in the world Russia could use their airspace, something I do not know, but most likely they are now launching attacks. The only way they can violate the airspace would be if they launch attack from here. So they are launching attack maybe even from here. Who knows? We do not know, because to me it doesn't make any sense why Russia and its missiles will cross over Moldova and Romanian airspace again, unless they use something, maybe the base from some of the countries here, maybe who knows who is giving Russian military base there. But Romanian airspace traveling, Romanian airspace, Moldovan airspace, and then hitting Ukraine. By the way, this is a separate attack, not the one that took place on Christmas Day. This is a separate attack. But nevertheless, you can imagine, if you take a look at the map, it doesn't really make sense to me much. How would Russian missile travel through Romania and Moldovan airspace? Something I do not know. Or it is possible that they are now using ICBM. So let's talk about that possibility. So ICBM is a long-range ballistic missile. It is possible, the other explanation would be that perhaps Moscow is using those ICBM, intercontinental ballistic missiles, to target Ukraine. Then, because these are long-range, because they were not detected or destroyed by Ukrainian Air Force or the radar system or the air defense system they have in place, maybe because these missiles, long-range ICBM, were not destroyed in Ukraine, they travel all the way to Moldova. So that shows the length or the range of those missiles and hit both Moldova, not hit, but use their airspace, and Romania. But then the question is, where did this missile fall, right? But that's another explanation. Again, the other one, as I said, it is possible that Russia, their bases are somewhere here. We do not know, but definitely they are here, in and around the Black Sea. What is happening right now is something massive. This attack was the 13th attack in terms of its scale. It was the 13th largest attack on Ukraine this year. So I'm going to be taking you back to the map here.
Come on, man.
So that you can see.
Man, this ain't no sneak attack, man. Putin didn't sneak them. Hey, this is what's so crazy about this. So I have to find that speech. The West is trying to hide it. President Putin, the whole world is talking about what happened like 2 or 3 days ago when Putin, like a gunfighter from the Wild Wild West days, and you call a man out to a draw, man to man, he called the West side, he called NATO out mano a mano. He told him, he said, I want y'all to pick a place in Ukraine and put y'all most advanced weapon systems, air defense systems, anywhere, wherever you put them at. He said, I'm going to attack that location. And then the whole world going to know you've been lying and stealing money from your people. You can't stop us. But the point is, you can't stop us in Ukraine. You definitely not going to be able to stop us. You need to, he's telling the warmongers, stop what you're doing because you next.
Where Kharkiv is and how close these two places are. I have the hotel here on the map, but it's actually the place itself, Dnipro Petrovsk. But then Kharkiv and these two areas, they're very close to Russian border. Think about this. They are now closing in on Kiev. Now, again, as I said at the beginning of this video, some sources are reporting that Kiev was also attacked. Kiev was also attacked, but definitely these areas close to Russian border, they are getting infiltrated by Russian military. The missiles attack is happening. The attack drones are being used, and therefore Moscow, they have launched these massive attacks in order to wrap things up as fast as possible. Now, the timing of this particular attack was very, very important because it happened on Christmas Day. And also there was another attack that took place during the Christmas Eve. So 2 attacks, one on Wednesday where Russia launched 100 attack drones, and they have also used ballistic missiles on Ukraine. And the other one on the Christmas Day, same kind of attack, but they targeted these 2 areas on Christmas Day with, again, massive drone attack on both occasions. Now, I want to actually pinpoint a few things because we need to do some analysis as to why we're seeing this kind of attack on Ukraine. But before I do the analysis, I just want you to remind you guys, if you're not subscribed, consider subscribing because you do not want to miss out on all of this detail and the analysis that we do here every day. So we will talk about the Romanian airspace in a second and the Moldovan airspace in a second. Russia, and this is coming on the Western media, Russia launched an quote-unquote inhuman attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure. It is the 13th time this year Russia has carried out a major attack. At least 1 person died in the attacks in the western Dnipropetrovsk region, while 6 others were injured in Kharkiv. Russia launched more than 70 missiles on Wednesday, including ballistic missiles and more than 100 attack drones. Now, Ukraine's foreign minister said, Andriy Sybiha, that Russian missile passed Moldovan and Romanian airspace. So again, if you take a look at this map, I do not know how it was possible that Russia's missile will pass through these 2 countries' airspace, something very, very mysterious. Or maybe a military analyst could tell us exactly what happened, but this is what happened right now. The country, Poland, Italy, recently, Giorgia Meloni, the Italian Prime Minister, she said that the threat coming from Russia is much bigger than we have ever imagined. Maybe Russia is sending a message to these countries, including Italy now, that yes, we are serious, we mean business, and that any country for that matter is going to be a military target for us, especially after the Atacms attack and the Storm Shadow attack on Russian territories. Russia is not choosing anymore which country it will attack. It will attack pretty much any country that will be sympathetic to the NATO or part of NATO. They will have absolute no problem attacking them because Russia believes they have now the right to use force against any of these NATO countries. Now, Russia launched this inhuman attack. So this is coming on CNN, and they're obviously freaking out how Russia could do this. Now, one thing you have to understand, the other reason why it may have happened, Ukraine, this is the other reason. So Ukraine, they used to celebrate Christmas on January the 7th, but Zelensky to do it with Russian. So Russia has January 7th, the day for the Christmas celebration. Zelensky changed that to December 25th. That could be another reason why Putin is freaking out with Zelensky, and to teach him a lesson, he struck Ukraine on that day. Now, Russia launched inhuman attack on Ukraine's energy infrastructure on Christmas Day with explosions reported across the country. Ukraine's President Zelensky said, it is the 13th time this year Russia has carried out a major attack on Ukrainian energy, leaving the country in a precarious position while the war grinds into a third winter. At least 1 person died in the attacks in the eastern Dnipropetrovsk region, while 6 others were injured in Kharkiv, less than 20 miles from Russian border. So again, you can see that Russia is attacking those region close to Russian border.
Putin challenged them to a duel. Putin challenged them people to a duel, man. He didn't sneak them. He told the West, "Oh, y'all think y'all can protect these people? Okay, let's see." Because they're not going to show us this on TV. That's the problem. The whole world talking about it, except for the United States and people in the U.S. He challenged the U.S. to a duel, man. Say, hey, man, I will destroy anywhere in Ukraine. Put your weapon systems there. Let the whole world see y'all cannot defend y'all citizens while y'all talking all this shit on TV to me. I'm in the most powerful position ever right now. Come on, man. The U.S. used to be a superpower.
I can't help but ask about the statements we've heard in the last few weeks, speaking about the footage of the first combat tests of the newest Orshnik missile that has been circulated around the world. It seems that it really has no shortcomings, but the West, for example, continues to call Orshnik a modification of an old Soviet weapon. They say that this missile can be shot down by air defense even at the launch stage. How could you comment on this? Does it have any shortcomings? And if you allow me, I have a clarifying question. What meaning did the creators of the Orshnik missile put into its name? Because there are different versions on this matter. First, regarding how old or new this weapon is, modern. This is a modern, very new weapon. Everything that is done in any field of activity is based on some previous developments, on previous achievements, and then people take a step forward. The same applies to the Orshnik missile. Yes, there were developments, and, by the way, developments of the Russian period. Here, on this basis, scientists, designers, engineers thought about what else to do. They coordinated their position with the Ministry of Defense, with the customer. In the end, it dawned on me. And I also took part in the final decision on whether or not to produce this missile, and what volume, when and how. This is a new weapon. I repeat once again, this is a medium and shorter range weapon.
His personal weapon.
You said that some experts in the West believe that such a missile is easily shot down, destroyed.
Prove it.
Especially at the initial trajectory of the flight. What can you say to such experts? There are several types of air defense systems. As you know, you are from the Zvezda TV channel. This is Patriot, right?
Talk your shit, Putin.
These are more modern THAAD systems. I do not know whether they are in Ukraine or not. In my opinion, they are not there. If the Americans decide to install these air defense systems, let them install them. Let them install THAAD. These are more modern systems, similar to our C-400. If Patriot can be compared to the Russian C-300 system, then THAAD is like the C-400. Its characteristics are a little weaker, but overall it is like the C-400. Let them install them, and we will ask our guys in Ukraine to tell us what modern and valuable solutions are there. When I talk about our guys, I say this without irony.
Don't do that.
We have someone to talk to in Ukraine, and there are many of our guys there who, together with us, dream of ridding their country of the neo-Nazi regime.
Now, don't let that go over your head. When we talk to our guys in Ukraine, that said shit was through the whole Ukrainian military, through the whole Ukrainian government. He's not talking about just regular. He letting them know, yeah, that's how we know what's going on. We know what to hit, when to hit it, how to hit it. Our people are tired of y'all too, man. That's why Zelensky is nowhere for you to run, nowhere for you to hide. Our people in Ukraine.
But there are other means of destruction. This is the missile defense system, about which there was a lot of talk. There were a lot of discussions. We once begged the Americans not to deploy this system, so that we would not have to create overcoming systems. In the end, we did it, as you remember. We have a glide vehicle, the Avanguard, which does not fly along a ballistic trajectory, but spreads along the ground without going into space. It is not a ballistic missile, and so on. We have done a lot to overcome the missile defense system. In general, from the point of view of the interests of American taxpayers, this whole story with their missile defense system is an expensive thing that does little to ensure the security of their country. But this system has nevertheless been created by...
Now, what he just said was, with all due respect to the American taxpayers, y'all been getting ripped off because that shit can't protect you. They can't protect you. They need to stay out of my business because I don't want to do it to you. That's what he really just said.
By them in a significant volume. They have created two positional areas, one in Romania and one in Poland. And there they already have 24 anti-missiles on combat duty. I don't remember. I think they are called Standard 3. In Romania, I think it is Modification 1B. The range of destruction is 300 kilometers. The altitude of destruction is from 80 to 250 kilometers. In Poland, a more formidable weapon has been installed, a newer one. There, the interception range is already 1,000 kilometers, and the interception altitude is 500 kilometers. But our Orshnik is a medium-range weapon, and medium-range weapons are 1,000, 1,500, 3,000 or more, up to 5,500 kilometers. Its range is like this. Now let's imagine that our system is located at a distance of 2,000 kilometers from the target. Even anti-missiles located on the territory of Poland will not reach it. Yes, in the first section of the path, in the boost section, they say that it is very vulnerable. But firstly, nothing will fly there. Even if these positional areas are not protected, and they are, of course, protected, nothing flies there. There are no systems that can fly there. That's the first thing. And secondly, after all, to fly such a distance, it takes time. And in a few seconds, we are already starting to separate the warheads. That's it. The train has left. So there is no chance of shooting down these missiles. If those Western experts you mentioned think so, then let them offer us and let them offer those in the West and the United States who pay them for their analysis to conduct some kind of technological experiment, say, a high-tech duel of the 21st century.
He calling them out.
Let them choose some object to destroy, say, in Kiev. Let them concentrate all their air defense and missile defense forces there, and we will strike there with the Orshnik missile, and we will see what happens. We are ready for such an experiment. Is the other side ready for this? But in any case, we do not rule it out. I mean, that all their air defense and missile defense systems are still in operation. But for us it will be interesting. What I told you, our engineers, scientists, military specialists tell me. They're at the level of political leadership in the United States. They also tell something. Let's conduct such an experiment, such a technological duel, and let's see what happens. It is interesting. I think that it will be useful for both us and the American side. What? Why such a name? Should I answer honestly? I do not know. Let's ask another question from the audience. Let's go in that direction. I see Rossiyskaya Gazeta there. Maybe something about peaceful affairs? Rossiyskaya Gazeta, Isil Garaykanova, Vladimir Vladimirovich, you recently signed a decree on changing the nuclear doctrine. Do you think the West heard this signal correctly? Did they understand it correctly? I don't know how they understood it. You should ask them. I know what the content of these changes is. But this is not a new doctrine. These are real changes. But I will name some key things. We are talking about some military dangers, new dangers, that can develop into military threats. This includes the emergence of these missile defense systems and some other things, and we are voicing them. Then we are talking about increasing the responsibility of non-nuclear states that can take part in aggression against the Russian Federation together with countries that possess nuclear weapons. And if such countries, like their allies, also create a threat to our sovereignty, the existence of Russia, then we mean that we consider ourselves entitled to use our nuclear weapons against them. And finally, there is one more component related to nuclear weapons control. There is one more important thing. We announced that if the same threats are created by them for our ally, for a member of the Union state, for Belarus, then the Russian Federation will consider this in the same way as the creation of similar threats for Russia itself. And we will do everything to ensure the security of Belarus. We are doing this in agreement with the Belarusian leadership, in agreement with the president of Belarus, Alexander Grigorievich Lukashenko. And I think that this is a very important component of the updated nuclear strategy of the Russian Federation. Vladimir Vladimirovich, if you do not mind, I see our American journalist colleagues here. Please. I see NBC in the middle sector of the hall. Yes. Please. Mr. President, Keir Simmons, NBC News. There are two questions, if you allow. The first question concerns President-elect Trump. Mr. President, you have failed to achieve the goals of the special military operation. A lot of Russians have died, including a general who was assassinated here in Moscow this week. The leader of Syria that you supported has been removed from power. Mr. President, when you meet with President Trump, you will be the weaker leader. What are you going to do? What can you offer as a compromise? And the second question, Mr. President, the mother of the American journalist who went missing in Syria, Austin Tice, sent you a letter asking for your help in finding her son because she said that you have connections to the Syrian government and former President Assad. Are you prepared to ask President Assad for information about what happened in Syria so that this missing son can be found, so that this American journalist can be found? Please repeat your question again regarding the journalist. Where did he disappear? Where did this journalist disappear? When and what happened to him there? Okay. I have a letter that was sent to you this week. A letter from the mother of an American journalist
another spy
who went missing in Syria 12 years ago. His name is Austin Tice. In this letter, she asks for your help in finding him because, as she says, you have close ties to the former president of Syria, Assad. Would you be able to ask President Assad to provide information regarding Austin Tice? She said that she is ready to come to Moscow if necessary, if it will help to obtain possible information about her son. I understand. Please sit down. To be honest, I have not yet met with President Assad since his arrival in Moscow, but I plan to do so. I will definitely talk to him. But you and I are adults. We understand. 12 years ago, a man disappeared in Syria. 12 years ago. We understand what the situation was like there 12 years ago. There was active fighting there on both sides. Does President Assad himself know what happened to this American citizen, this journalist, who, as I understand it, was doing his journalistic duty in a combat zone? But nevertheless, I promise that I will definitely ask him this question, just as we can ask the question of those people who control the situation on the ground in Syria today. You said, what can we offer? Or what can I offer to the newly elected President Trump when we meet? First of all, I don't know when we will meet, because he doesn't say anything about it. I haven't spoken to him at all for over 4 years. And I am ready for this, of course, at any time. And I will be ready for a meeting if he wants it. You said that this conversation will take place in a situation when I will be in a weakened state. Dear colleague, why do I say the word dear? Because Despite all the persecution of our press, we allow you to work in Russia, and you do so freely. That is already good. You and those people who pay your wages in the United States would very much like Russia to be in a weakened position. I hold a different point of view. I believe that Russia has become much stronger over the past 2 or 3 years. Why? Because we are becoming a truly sovereign country. We are no longer dependent on anyone. We are able to confidently stand on our own feet from an economic point of view. I have already spoken about the pace of economic development. We are strengthening our defense capability. The combat readiness of our armed forces today, I say with confidence, is at the highest level in the world, at the highest place in the world. The same applies to our defense industry. We are increasing the production of everything that is needed for our Army and Navy, both for the current moment and for the future. We are doing this quite confidently, at a fast pace, which we cannot say about our opponents. We have already talked about the successes of our armed forces. Not least of all, this is due to the growth of production in the defense industries of the Russian Federation. We are doing this, I repeat, confidently and quite rationally. It was said that our troops are advancing along the line of combat contact. And how? Due to what? Including due to the availability of the equipment that I just mentioned. Yes. Practically all NATO countries are fighting with us. We talked about our inflation. And what is happening there? One 155mm shell cost 2,000 euros 2 years ago. Now it costs 8,000 euros. This is a 4-fold increase in price. If everything continues to develop at the same rate, then not only will the 2% for defense spending, which the newly elected President of the United States, Mr. Trump, has always insisted on, be insufficient for NATO countries. They will not even have 3% of their GDP. The training, combat readiness, and internal state of the Russian troops are such that perhaps no other army in the world has them today. Therefore, I believe that Russia is largely in the state we were striving for. It has grown stronger. It has become a truly sovereign country. And we will make decisions without any regard for other people's opinions. We will be guided only by our national interests.
Check that man, Putin.
You mentioned Syria. You, and those, I repeat, who pay your salaries, want to present everything that is happening in Syria as some kind of failure, as Russia's defeat. I assure you that this is not so. And I will tell you why this is not so. We came to Syria 10 years ago to prevent a terrorist enclave from being created there, like what we saw in some other countries, say, in Afghanistan. In general, we achieved our goal. And even those groups that fought at one time with the Assad regime, with government troops, they also underwent internal changes. It is not for nothing that today many European countries and the United States want to establish relations with them. If they are terrorist organizations, then why are you getting involved? So they have changed, haven't they? And this means that to a certain extent our goal has been achieved. Further,
that's a fact.
We did not have ground troops in Syria. They simply were not there. There are 2 of our bases there, Air Force and Naval. The ground component consisted of the armed forces of Syria itself, and some, as we all know, there is no secret here, so-called pro-Iranian combat units. We even withdrew special operations forces from there at one time. We didn't fight there. But what happened there? When armed opposition groups approached Aleppo, at that time Aleppo was defended by about 30,000 people. 350 militants entered the city.
Okay.
Government troops, and with them the so-called pro-Iranian units, retreated without a fight. They blew up their positions and left.
That's what he's saying.
And also, practically, with the exception of small exceptions, where there were some clashes, it was the same throughout the territory of Syria. Earlier, for example, our same Iranian friends asked us to help them transport their units to Syrian territory. Now they asked us to withdraw them from there. We took 4,000 Iranian fighters to Tehran from the HUMILIATED base. Some of the so-called pro-Iranian units left without a fight for Lebanon. The other part went to Iraq. But today the situation is...
See, hey, we can't let that go, man. See, I knew it. He's saying the Iranians, they didn't fight. Syrians definitely didn't fight. He's saying we went picked up 4,000 Iranians from Iran and took them to Syria, man. Then they told us to take them back home. What's going on here? Now, Iran is saying assault. But Russia is saying the Syrians and Iranians didn't want to fight. So we definitely wasn't going to fight on their behalf. I've been said that. Now Putin is saying out his own mouth. You see that Middle Eastern game that the Persians and the Arabs, you see, and the Turks are playing. Putin is very wise to see, you know, you can get trapped. But he's right. Russians personally, they have not lost. He still got plenty of power in Syria, moving forces to Libya. Very wise leader.
Is not easy.
Put Iran out there. That they definitely folded like lawn chairs in Syria.
Of course. In the Syrian Arab Republic, we really hope that peace and calm will come there. We maintain relations with all the groups that control the situation there, with all the countries in the region. The overwhelming majority of them tell us that they would be interested in our military bases remaining in Syria. I don't know. We have to think about it, because we have to decide for ourselves how we will develop relations with those political forces that now control and will control the situation in this country in the future. Our interests must coincide. If we stay there, then we must do something in the interests of the country where we are. What will these interests be? What can we do for them? This is a question that awaits a painstaking researcher from both sides. There are already things we can do, including using these bases, namely, we have already proposed this to our partners, including those located in Syria, and to neighboring countries. We proposed using, say, the HUMILIATED air base to deliver humanitarian aid to Syria. And this is accepted with understanding and a desire to organize this work together. The same applies to the naval base in Tartus. Therefore, whoever would like to present Russia as weakened, you know, since you are an American, I want to remember a well-known person and writer who once said, "Rumors about my death are greatly exaggerated."
Come on now.
If there is ever a meeting with the newly elected president, with Mr. Trump, then I am sure that we will have something to talk about. Vladimir Vladimirovich, I want to remind you of another question that a colleague asked, a question about the murder of General Kirillov. Yes. About the murder of General Kirillov. You said the word assassination attempt.
Disrespectful.
I am grateful to you for this because you indirectly admitted that this is a terrorist act. Why? Because this murder was committed in a way that is dangerous to the lives of many people. The regime in Kiev has repeatedly committed such crimes, terrorist attacks against many citizens of the Russian Federation. And in Kursk now, when they are shooting peaceful citizens there, I mean, in the Kursk region, and in other territories of Russia, they killed journalists, your colleagues. They committed terrorist attacks against journalists. We have never heard, I don't mean you personally, we have never heard from the Western journalistic corps condemnation of such terrorist attacks. But I am grateful to you at least for the fact that you remembered this. Let's work with the audience a little more. Okay, there is also great interest. I see a poster, Tatars, bricks. We were in Kazan just recently. By the way, I apologize. I want to address your American colleague.
So we don't got no leaders. See,
Can
they
you
don't got
hear
no
me?
leaders. That's why NATO is going to lose. They don't have nobody like this, man, to sit there, just speak to journalists. Not one leader in the world besides this man sit there and talk to all the journalists, hold 2-3 hour meetings. They can't even do it. They not on his level. That's why they jealous of this man. But he lets them know, man, it's nothing they really can do. And they got themselves pushed into a corner. And he keep telling them, you fooled your citizens for far too long. You can't defend them. If the West was in the position he was in, they would have been attacked Russia.
If you have any other questions, ask them.
Child, he don't want no more.
Let's go back to Kazan now.
He don't want no more.
You will think.
He don't even want. Oh, you tapping that? Oh, he said, let's go back to my. Oh, wait, man. God damn, Putin vicious. He said, no, let's go back to my American friend, man. I ain't through with this kill yet. You got any more questions you want to talk to me about? Huh? He looking around. Hey, ain't nobody else want to talk? No, you, buddy. You just had so many questions. Till you just got undressed before the whole goddamn world. You got some more questions. Oh, hell no.
Think, right? You formulate the question, and we will talk to the Tatars for now, then with the Americans, please. My question is this. Are you ready to reach any compromises regarding Kiev? You said that Ukraine should compromise. And are you ready to compromise? What are you ready to offer as concessions? Are negotiations possible under Trump's leadership? I apologize for missing this very important part of your question. Politics is the art of compromise. And we have always said that we are ready for negotiations and compromises. It's just that the opposite side, literally and figuratively, refused to negotiate. And we are always ready for this. The result of these negotiations is always compromises. After all, we reached an agreement, in fact, in Istanbul at the end of 2022. And I repeat for the 100th time, the Ukrainian side initialed this document, which means that, in general, they agreed with it. Then, for some reason, they refused. It is clear why they refused. Because your ally, Mr. Johnson, a man with a good haircut, arrived and told them that they need to fight to the last Ukrainian. That is why they are fighting. These Ukrainians who want to fight will soon run out. There, in my opinion, soon there will be no one left.
Man. When Putin said the man with a good haircut, Boris Johnson is a fucking clown, and he look like a bozo and a weirdo, and his hair be all over the place. Putin feeling he's in his bag right now, man. Cracking jokes. Huh? The man with the good haircut. Oh, man, Putin, do your thing, man.
Who wants to fight?
They're not on your level, man.
And we are ready for negotiations, but it is necessary that that country be ready for both negotiations and compromise.
Putin are great. They didn't play that on TV. Why MSNBC? Putin say he want to compromise. This should have been all over the news. They don't want you to hear the rest of what he said. Like when he called them out and said, quit ripping off your tax base. Your weapons don't work. You can't defend yourself. And if you can, I challenge you to a duel. The man challenged them people to a duel, man.
After the end of World War II, the United States Navy was considered the pride and a kind of hallmark of this country for many decades. However, in the 21st century, the United States Navy has been slowly degrading and sinking over the past few years. Surprisingly, the National Security Advisor to the U.S. President, Jake Sullivan, also recognized this fact, speaking at the Center for Strategic and International Studies in Washington. In particular, he admitted that the condition of the United States Navy is deplorable. According to him, over the past 4 decades, 5 large shipyards have closed in the shipbuilding industry alone, and tens of thousands of people have been laid off from their jobs. As a result, suppliers have withdrawn from the market, and the supply chain of necessary materials for constructing submarines and ships was disrupted. Jake Sullivan noted that after the end of the Cold War, the U.S. authorities assumed that the supply chain of necessary materials at shipyards would operate at the same level. However, these assumptions did not work out. The National Security Advisor to the U.S. President noted that the scale of problems in American shipbuilding is currently very large. According to him, the United States urgently needs to hire 150,000 more qualified electricians, installers, welders, and machine operators to meet the demand for at least nuclear submarines over the next 10 years. At the end of his speech, National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan regretfully admitted that due to all these production problems at American shipyards, the program for the construction of 12 new Columbia-class strategic nuclear submarines, with a total cost of $133 billion, is being disrupted. These latest U.S. submarines were supposed to replace 14 obsolete Ohio-class submarines with Trident II ballistic missiles on board by 2031. However, unfortunately for the Pentagon, the U.S. nuclear triad will be left without the latest submarines, due to the ongoing crisis in American shipbuilding. In general, watching the United States, it becomes clear that after the end of the Cold War, Washington relaxed and began to make strategic mistakes, as a result of which the country's foreign policy and defense industry began to degrade rapidly. At the moment, the United States is facing a real industrial disaster for the entire defense sector. The fact is that over the past 34 years, while the United States has been spreading democracy around the world, interfering in the internal affairs of other countries, organizing so-called color revolutions, and overthrowing the presidents of unwelcome states, Russia and China have continued to develop and strengthen not only their armies, but also technologies in the defense sector. As a result, in the 21st century, the United States found itself in the role of a catch-up runner in rocket science, hypersonic technologies, and electronic warfare systems. Moreover, in the 21st century, the United States has also managed to lose its status as a great maritime power. Let me remind you that in 1987, the U.S. Navy was rightfully considered the world's most powerful, with 590 warships of various classes in service. And all these warships were maintained by 8 mighty shipbuilding plants. However, in the 21st century, the U.S. Navy has completely lost all its power. Currently, only 4 shipyards are operating in the United States. And these shipyards are not able to meet the needs of the Navy. Moreover, in the 21st century, only 287 warships remained at the disposal of American admirals, while China has increased the number of its warships to 370 units. And this gap in the number of American and Chinese warships continues to grow rapidly. Yes, unfortunately for Washington, in the 21st century, the United States no longer owns the world's largest fleet, having ceded this status to China. However, the bad news for the owners of the White House did not end there. As it turned out, in the period from 2017 to 2024, the United States also lost its status as the owner of the world's most powerful and largest submarine fleet. And the most insulting thing for Washington is that the United States has ceded this status to Russia, which for decades the US authorities have contemptuously called a gas station country. As it turned out, over the past 7 years, Russian shipyards have been able to complete and transfer to the Russian Navy 15 modern submarines of various classes and purposes. In particular, we are talking about the Boris-class submarines of Project 955M. In the last 4 years alone, the Russian Navy has received 5 nuclear submarines of this project. We are talking about Prince Pozarsky, Emperor Alexander III, Generalissimo Suvorov, Prince Oleg, and Prince Vladimir. In addition, the Russian Navy has also received modern Yazan-class nuclear submarines of Project 885M. We are talking about Arkhangelsk, Krasnoyarsk, Novosibirsk, and Kazan. In addition, over the past 3 years, the Russian Navy has also received 6 modern Varshavyanka-class quiet diesel-electric submarines of Project 636.3. It is authentically known that many of these latest submarines are armed not only with new-generation Bulava 30 intercontinental ballistic missiles, but also with Zircon hypersonic missiles. Thus, as of December 2024, Russia has become the owner of the world's most powerful and largest submarine fleet. And the most frightening thing for the United States is the fact that this gap in the number of the latest submarines is increasing with each new year. It is reported that in the next 5-10 years, the number and power of the Russian submarine fleet will increase significantly. Currently, Russia is building 8 modern submarines of various classes, including new generation ones. The most amazing thing is that Russian shipyards have already surpassed the Soviet Union in terms of their production capacity. Thus, before our eyes, Moscow has finally regained its status as a great maritime power, proving to the whole world that Russia is a global superpower. Against this backdrop, American experts and analysts from the authoritative magazine The Hill called on Donald Trump to call Vladimir Putin and recognize Russia as a great superpower. According to them, Donald Trump's administration should recognize the obvious and start a dialogue with Russia not from a position of strength, but on an equal footing, considering Moscow's national interests. According to them, times have changed, and the United States should reconsider its policy toward Moscow. American experts expressed confidence that if Washington continues to pursue an aggressive policy against such a superpower as Russia, it could end badly for the United States.
Thank you publicly and personally for all the time you've given us and all the work you and I have done together. It's been a joy and it's been an education for me and it's been a privilege to me. And I thank you for it publicly as I've done privately. And I hope we can continue to do it again next year. I want to talk about the 2 principal hotspots in the world now, the Middle East and Ukraine. I would like to start with Ukraine. In the past 10 days, the Ukrainians have assassinated a Russian general on a street in Moscow. They have dispatched drones to attack a residential building 500 miles east of Moscow. And according to Slovakian President Fico, Ukraine offered President Fico a $500 million bribe with American cash to change his position on the war in Ukraine. Where is Ukraine going?
Straight to hell. That's a horrible thing to say, on Christmas Eve, but it's the truth. In the last 10 days, Ukraine has suffered an average of 2,000 casualties, many of them fatal, per day. That's 20,000. The Russians have advanced, scores of kilometers surrounding Ukrainian troops, capturing more cities. Their advance is unstoppable and will not be stopped. This is the reality. What Ukraine can do right now is die, which they are very good at lately, and commit acts of terrorism, which they're becoming better at. But nothing that this fake president, Zelensky, and he is a fake president. Understand that he did not run an election. He has no legal authority to rule. And if there are negotiations eventually with Russia on Russia's terms, one of those terms is that Russia insists on negotiating with the legitimate leader of Ukraine, which means Ukraine is going to have to jettison this failure and put somebody else in his place. Russia's not in the mood right now to play games. And that's, that's what these are reindeer games that Zelensky's doing, horrible reindeer games, terrorist acts, but they're games. They don't change anything that's happening. They don't change the trajectory of this conflict at all. And that's all he has left in his little stupid bag of tricks. I don't mean to be mean, and I apologize for my language on Christmas Eve, but we're talking about war, and we're talking about a man who has shown absolutely no concern for the welfare of his people or his nation.
How does something like drone attacks on residential buildings 500 miles east of Moscow resonate in the Kremlin? Does it infuriate them? Does it change or modify President Putin's patience?
Well, again, I can't speak on behalf of the Kremlin. I can just say that based upon, what I've seen and the sense I have of the Russian spirit, it enrages them. I mean, it's a flagrant act of terrorism, hate-filled terrorism. There's nothing to be accomplished other than death and destruction. But Putin has his eye on the ball, and I've mentioned before, the game isn't killing Ukrainians. That's a consequence of the game. The game is getting a new European security framework. This has always been Russia's strategic goal and objective, is to engender stability on the European continent between, what they call Europe and Russia, which is a European power, whether Europe wants it to be or not. It's also an Asian power. It's so dang big. But what the Russians want is security. They want an end to this madness of, multiple decades of American policy of bringing Russia down. It's amazing. Just this week, I think the National Security Archives of the United States published we've all heard of George Kennan's famous long telegram that he wrote back in 1946 that set the stage for the Cold War. Well, apparently in 1994, a diplomat named Merriman wrote a similar cable out of the Russian embassy. It was suppressed, but what he said is, what we're doing is we're seeking the destruction of Russia. We don't care about it. We don't care about democracy. It was basically about propping up Yeltsin. He was talking about, we're making a political decision to the economic and social detriment of the Russian people, and it will come back and bite us. Well, it has. The Russians have risen up, and they're tired of this game being played by the United States and Europe of trying to destroy Russia, not, say, oh, we're going to halt you here. The physical destruction of Russia is the goal and objective of the United States and Europe for the past several decades. How would we as Americans feel if China said, we don't want to just outcompete you, we want to physically destroy you, we want to break America up into components and have your entire society collapse? We would be resentful. And yet that's where the Russians are. They want peace. That's what they want. And we are the ones who created this conflict in Ukraine. We're the ones who created it. We're the ones who set it up so we could destroy Russia. And the Russians are saying that ain't going to happen. And we do want peace, but it'll be peace on our terms.
The Financial Times on yesterday, reported that the Trump transition team advised Kyiv and some European leaders that President-elect Trump, upon his inauguration next month, will not stop the cash and military equipment in the pipeline going to Ukraine. Add to that some of the crazy things this General Kellogg, an emissary appointed by President Trump, who apparently is acting as an emissary already, even though Trump is not yet in office, has been saying that the Russians lost 6 times as many troops as the Ukrainians did. You got to scratch your head about Trump. Now, I don't know if you think the Financial Times report is accurate, but it is clear that General Kellogg is either being intentionally deceived by whoever is briefing him or is profoundly in error and knows it.
He's profoundly in error. Whether he knows it or not is another thing. But, generals at some point in time have to stop blaming it on their briefers. You got 3 stars for a reason, pal. It's because you're supposed to be able to think and see through the briefers and be smarter than the briefer. Captains blame lieutenants. Generals have to take the responsibility for themselves. Kellogg is responsible for every word that comes out of his mouth. It's his duty and responsibility to fact check the briefers, to ask them questions, to ask, where did you get this data? What is your source? Are there any competing sources? These are the things that I know every time I briefed a 3-star general or a 4-star general. These are the questions I got. They don't accept anything at face value. They push back because they want to know the hard truth, however inconvenient that truth may be. I don't trust the mainstream media, right? Their job is to poison the well. So, there are so many people out there right now on the periphery of Team Trump who are talking to the media as if they are Trump himself. What I do know is that Donald Trump recently said that this is only going to be resolved when he meets and speaks with Vladimir Putin, and that's the most accurate statement there. Putin is not going to sit down with Kellogg or intermediary. Putin doesn't give a damn what the United States wants, thinks, or whatever. Russia, I told you, is sick and tired of this game of America seeking to destroy Russia. This is existential. And so when Trump's going to get one shot to stop this war, one shot. And that shot is you will do what Russia tells you to do, and then Russia will throw in some trimmings to make it look like there's a political compromise. But Russia has won this war. And if the United States wants to broaden the scope and scale of this war, Russia will engage in that for victory, not to play a game. And so Trump, like I said, he realizes, I think he has one shot, and he started to pull back and say, this is going to be resolved when I meet with Putin. But understand that he's not going to get that meeting unless he puts something on the table. Putin's not going to just say, hey, come here, let's sit down, let's talk. Putin's going to say, what do you want to talk about?
Right.
Give us some details on this. So Trump's got to get better advisors than Keith Kellogg and Michael Waltz, or whatever the national security advisor's name is, and all these people. He has the worst advisors in the world when it comes to Russia. These people don't know anything about Russia, and they are all products, and this is the most important part, they are all products of a system that has sought for the past 4 to 5 decades to physically destroy Russia. That's the only thing in their mind. That's all they're programmed to do. They're not programmed to peacefully coexist with Russia. If Trump wants to peacefully coexist with Russia, he needs to wipe the slate clean, bring in people of a like mind, and come up with sound policy.
At the risk of raising your blood pressure, I guess you're advising Trump that when he meets with the Russians, he should not bring Sebastian Gorka with him.
I don't think Gorka would be allowed into Russia right now. And I'll be surprised if Gorka stays on the team much longer. I think this was a political throwaway. The man can't hold a security clearance. His brain doesn't work. His mouth is connected to the brain that doesn't work. And every word he says is to the detriment of American national security and the success of a Trump presidency. So Sebastian Gorka, notice he made that one statement about Trump being about Putin being a thug. And then we haven't heard from him since. And I think that's probably the best way to deal with Gorka is to just ignore him.
Why is Syria being torn apart as we speak?
Because Syria is a fake country that was artificially constructed by the French with a mandate given to them by the League of Nations in the aftermath of the First World War. They tried to bring together, a variety of religions and creeds and sects and nationalities, and it was a failed country. The Baathists, who are Arab socialist nationalists, came in and said, we can unite everybody with a vision of what Arab statehood should look like. But that vision was incompatible with a number of things: competing Arab nationalism, the Nasserites, they called them, named for Nasser, the Egyptian president. They joined together to create an Arab League or an Arab Union back in an Arab Republic back in the 60s. The Muslim Brotherhood, which is a major Islamic movement. The Baathists were incompatible. They went to war. It's a nation that's always had this strife built into it from the very start. It was suppressed violently by the Baathists, but they held this thing called Syria together. And if they had ever been given a chance, maybe it could have succeeded. But we've been trying to destroy Syria in the name of Israel since 1948, and finally, the Zionist agenda was fulfilled. We got rid of the Baathists, and now we're watching a nation self-destruct before our very eyes.
Can the HTS, the group led by al-Jilani, actually put together a government? And is there a landmass over which they could actually govern once the Turks and the Israelis are finished dividing up Syria?
Well, I mean, there is a limit to what Israel can do. If you take a look at the actual, territorial acquisition with Israel, it's purely on the periphery. I'm not defending it at all, but it's not as though Israel's making a grab for Damascus or anything of that nature. It's it's bad what they're doing. The biggest offender will be Turkey. Turkey right now is, of course, playing a political game, but Erdogan clearly has visions of reviving the Ottoman Empire. His rhetoric has said that. He speaks of Syrian sovereignty, but he also speaks of the inevitability of Turkish expansion into regions such as Idlib, Aleppo, Raqqa. These are former Ottoman provinces along the border with Turkey that Erdogan said should have been Turkish to begin with, but the French stole it from him. It's time he's going to reverse history. So I think you're seeing Turkey headed towards creating the conditions for a referendum, so that Turkey can say, well, we're just abiding by the United Nations principle of self-determination. Funny, Russia did it and the world condemned it, but Turkey's going to do it. Let's see how the world reacts. But it's the end of the Syrian nation. What's going to be left is a rump state that's ungovernable. I mean, to answer your question, Judge, do you believe that Al-Qaeda is capable of governing a nation like Syria that has secular secularism in its DNA without resorting to violence to suppress that secularism? The answer, of course, is not just no, but hell no. So as long as Jolani and HTS and Al-Qaeda is at the helm, don't expect anything good coming out of Syria.
We're going to take a break for just a minute, Scott, for a commercial announcement. When we come back, I'm going to ask you if you think that Donald Trump and the Republicans will effectively undo. Do you think that President Trump and the GOP and the Congress and the people that he has indicated he's going to appoint around him will effectively undo the quest for a Palestinian state?
Not just effectively undo it, they will destroy the quest. Their goal is not to have a Palestinian state. Their goal is to have a greater Israel. And, there was an opportunity prior to the fall of Syria that Israel, where Israel would have become, if not mortally injured, severely injured, so that a Trump term would be more about, critical care than fulfilling a strategic vision. But the collapse of Syria has allowed Netanyahu's right-wing government to survive and now thrive. There's still a lot of problems in Israel. I'm not going to pretend that Netanyahu is out of the woods yet, but he's in a much stronger position today than he was a month ago. And the end result is when Trump becomes president, he's not going to be dealing with a weakened Netanyahu, but a strong Netanyahu, an emboldened Netanyahu, who will be dictating terms. Look, we've seen this game before. Trump inherited an Iranian nuclear deal from the Obama administration and immediately withdrew from it on the advice, indeed the demands of Netanyahu, citing Israeli intelligence, much of it manufactured. it was Trump that, envisioned and implemented the Abraham Accords, which was all about, destroying Palestinian statehood, any potential of Palestinian statehood, because it was about promoting Israel and what was good for Israel. And so this is where we're going to go. Now, I've been lectured by many pro-Palestinian groups that Palestine exists in the hearts of the Palestinians, and that even if the United States and Israel succeeds in depopulating Gaza and eradicating West Bank settlements and all that, you can never get rid of Palestine. And I'm not going to dissuade people of that thought. I mean, I respect people who believe in something in their hearts, but the fact of the matter is, what myself and others have been working for, some people for many decades, myself more recently since October 7th, is the creation of a Palestinian state, a physical entity that Palestinians could call their own home. And that's done. That's finished. It's not going to happen in 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, 40 years now, because the system is so fundamentally broken. And what I mean by the system, I mean the Middle East. There is no support whatsoever outside of, Lebanon, the Hezbollah, outside of Iraq, where you have some pro-Shia militias, outside of Iran or Yemen. Other than those four entities, there's no support whatsoever for a Palestinian state. Even European nations that speak of recognizing Palestine, watch how quick they walk away, because when you take the scales of geopolitical importance, preserving the European Union or preserving your status in the European Union will far outweigh the creation of a Palestinian state. So all those European states that have jumped in and said, this is what we want, this is where we're going to go, watch what happens when Trump starts putting the screws to them. Watch how quickly they jump the ship, because nobody out there other than Hezbollah, the Iranian militias in Iraq, Iran, or the Houthi have shown a willingness to sacrifice on behalf of Palestine. I mean, the Palestinians have, yes, Hamas, but even what is Palestine? I mean, in the West Bank, we have the Palestinian Authority led by Abu Mazen, President Mahmoud Abbas, who is literally a servant of Israel. So you have the president of the Palestinian Authority, paid for and working on behalf of Israel, sending his Israeli-trained Palestinian security forces to fight Palestinian freedom fighters in Jenin. That's Palestine. So there is no Palestine. Palestine doesn't exist. There's Gaza, there's Hamas, but that's being destroyed as we speak. I mean, these brave guys are still popping out of tunnels and doing heroic things, but at some point in time, without the support of the axis of resistance, they can't last forever. And then, at some point in time, the people of Gaza, who are, by the way, every day, Judge, dozens are being burned to death, murdered, slaughtered, butchered, blown to pieces by Israeli airplanes dropping American bombs. Israeli airplanes dropping American bombs, killing innocent civilians, but we're not talking about anymore because we're worried about HTS, Al-Qaeda in Syria. We're worried about other things. This was the danger of expanding the conflict. It's something I said all along. Keep your eye on the game. The game, if the game is a Palestinian state, then the only thing we can be talking about is Gaza and the Israeli genocide of Gaza, which empowers the will of the world to say there's a need for a Palestinian state. But the moment we stop talking about Gaza, the moment we stop talking about the genocide, is the moment that the cause of Palestine dies in the imagination of most of the people around the world.
Have Hamas and Hezbollah been degraded as military forces that the Israelis have to contend with?
Well, I mean, as a military force, their job wasn't to physically defeat Israel. So we have to keep that in mind. All they had to do is survive. By surviving, they defeated Israel because Israel defined victory as the physical destruction of Hamas and Hezbollah. Right now, Hezbollah is off the map. They've been removed from the playing board because of a ceasefire, and their ability to reconstitute, their military capabilities has been severely diminished by the loss of the land bridge to Iran through Syria. So even though Hezbollah still has some fire in their heart, I've listened to the statements, the idea that Hezbollah is not going to be able to turn around and begin anew the war of attrition with Israel, we'll see what happens there. Hamas, look, these are children of the camp. I've talked about this before. These are people that are born into a concentration camp, born into a prison, and they've got the jailbreak going, and they're not going to stop until they either achieve their objective or they're dead. Hamas has suffered tremendous losses, but in the last several months, because of Israel's genocide, Hamas has recruited 5,000 to 7,000 new fighters. Now, these may not be as well trained as the old ones, but all they have to do is have courage in their hearts, a prayer on their lips, and they pop out of a hole, run and place a mine on a tank, shoot an RPG, gun down a couple of Israelis, disappear down the hole. Now, many of them are going to die, but as long as they keep bleeding the Israeli Defense Force, you can't talk about an Israeli victory. So I don't know how long this is going to go, but Israel has not defeated Hamas at this juncture. Israel has fought Hezbollah to a tie, so to speak, but then politically, because war is an extension of politics by other means, the fact of the collapse of Syria has created a political problem for Hezbollah and puts Israel on top of them politically. But Israel, there's no appetite in Israel to go back to fighting Hezbollah. Remember why there's a ceasefire. It's not because Hezbollah surrendered, because the Israeli army turned to Netanyahu and said, we can't keep doing this. We just put our 2 best brigades in there. They got chewed up and spit out. We can't do this anymore. We're exhausted. We have to have a ceasefire. So they got the ceasefire. Then Syria collapsed and now able to flex their muscles into a vacuum, as opposed to taking on the lions of Hezbollah head on in southern Lebanon. But neither Hezbollah nor Hamas has been physically defeated at this point in time, so we can't talk about decisive Israeli victory yet on military terms. But politically, Israel is definitely in a stronger position today than they were a month ago.
Last question or last subject matter is war with Iran, U.S. and Israel versus Iran, likely?
I don't think so. I mean, this is where I'm going to get in trouble with a lot of Iranians out there. But my take on the Iranian president is that he does not want a war, and that he and his moderate faction inside Iran have considerable political clout at this juncture. The more conservative members of the Iranian government, the IRGC, and others are looking for a continuation of this fight. They believe that they have the military capability to do harm to Israel. But the fact of the matter is, if there's a war between Israel and Iran, Israel will suffer as well, very much, but so will Iran. And that's not the direction that the Iranian leadership wants. I remind everybody that in 2023, I met with President Raisi in September at the UN General Assembly. I and others. I wasn't there solo, but I listened to him, asked him some questions, etc. He made a point that the effort that was built up around this Kurdish girl who tragically died in Iranian police custody over a hijab violation, led to demonstrations that then were turned into a nationwide insurrection run by various anti-regime forces controlled by foreign intelligence services, including the United States. He said this was one of the greatest struggles in the history of Iran. Here in the West, we don't talk about it. He said that in 2023, Iran had one of the greatest challenges to the continuation of the revolution, that this revolt was real. They beat it, and he said they beat it because of the support of the Iranian people and the perseverance of the Iranian security forces. But he said it was touch and go. It was a big deal, and I think that the regime does not want to create a situation where you have a fracture between the Iranian people over Israel, over whether they go to war with Israel or not. That you need to unify the Iranian people. And the best way to do that is to fulfill the wishes and desires of the Iranian people for peace and security, especially economic security, which requires the sanctions to be lifted.
Right.
And that's the direction this president is going to go. So I think you're going to see negotiations with the Trump administration, and that Iran is going to put its nuclear program on the table and see what they can get in exchange for it.
Boy, do I wish Trump would listen to you, Scott. Scott, thank you very much. Thank you for everything you've done for us throughout the year. Thank you for your time today on Christmas Eve. Thank you for all the other projects on which I've been privileged to collaborate with you, and I look forward to doing even more of the same in 2025. Merry Christmas.
very good year ahead of them.
Yeah. Let's get started, Professor, with what we've heard from Israeli Defense Minister. He's talking about that we defeated Hamas, Hezbollah, destroyed Iran's air defense system, and right now with the Houthis, they're trying to decapitate people, these commanders in Yemen. Where are we heading, in your opinion?
I don't think we should take the Israeli regime's version of history too seriously. If we did, then that would mean there has never been a Palestinian people, there's never been a Holocaust in Gaza, and the people of Gaza were unprovoked and they were having fantastic lives, like in the West Bank, and they were just troublemakers who are terrorists. That would be the Zionist version of history. But I think it's pretty clear that the regime has failed in Gaza. It's been 15 months, almost 15 months, and they failed to take the Gaza Strip. They continue to give casualties. We see operations taking place regularly. A number of Israelis have been killed over the past 3-4 days. So that's not a victory. A victory would be like when they invaded Egypt and went all the way to and crossed the Sinai, and they reached the Suez Canal very swiftly. That's a victory. But for them to fail in Gaza after 15 months, that's definitely not a victory. Slaughtering people is not a victory. Slaughtering women and children, infants dying of a cold, that's not a victory. In fact, that's a major defeat because the world has been exposed to the brutality of the regime. In Lebanon as well, we saw how they murdered senior commanders, and of course, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah was also martyred. That's clear. That is a success. But they've also been fighting Hezbollah for almost 15 months now, and during the during the 2 months of heavy fighting, the regime failed to make any meaningful inroads into Lebanon. That's a failure. Again, they succeeded in slaughtering thousands of innocent Lebanese citizens, women and children, and ordinary people. That's not a success. That, again, I think is a failure for the regime. So on these two fronts, the Israelis haven't succeeded. If they had succeeded with regards to Iran and that they had destroyed Iran's air defenses, does anyone think for a moment that they would halt their airstrikes against Iran? They would be carrying out regular airstrikes against Iran, which they claim is defenseless. So again, that I don't take seriously. I think they are worried about the eventual Iranian retaliation for the airstrike on Iran, and they're saying this in order to make Iran think twice, perhaps, or for to convince their own people that things are going well. The only place where they have scored a victory is Syria. There's no doubt about that. They, along with the Americans and Mr. Erdogan and family-rich dictatorships, oil-rich dictatorships, or gas-rich dictatorships, they have succeeded in destroying Syria. And the regime or the government of Syria has fallen. Yes, that is a success. There's no doubt about that, and it's I think a tactical defeat for Russia and, of course, for Iran. Again, no doubt about that. In the short term, But again, that I think is not necessarily a long-term success story. because Syria is a very complicated country. You have significant minorities. You have the Kurds, you have the Alawites, the Druze, the Christians, the Shias, among others. And you also have Sunnis who, a huge segment of Sunnis who do not support the extremists, the Al-Qaeda. And we have to always keep in mind that Jolani was the deputy for ISIS. He was Abu Bakr Baghdadi's deputy for Syria. He was the head of Al-Qaeda for Syria. This is who Jolani was and who continues to be. And the split between HTS and Al-Qaeda was not an ideological split. It was based on mutual consensus. Both sides believed that the split should take place because of PR, for PR purposes. And when Jolani split, this was 8 years ago, he praised Al-Qaeda, he praised the leadership, he praised Osama bin Laden, and Al-Qaeda also praised him. So it's obvious that there's no ideological split. There's no difference between ISIS, Al-Qaeda, and HTS when it comes to ideology. So, and that is why Iran opposed the extremists in Syria. That's why Iran went to defend the legitimate government in Damascus, because for Iran, regardless of the qualities that existed in the Syrian government, and it had major shortcomings, obviously. It was no more despotic than other Arab dictatorships in the region, but it had one positive aspect to it, and that was it asserted its independence and it stood up to the Israeli regime. But also, in addition to that, its adversaries were extremists, were terrorists. So that is why Iran went to Syria to help the Syrians, to defend the country against the extremists. And while Syria has fallen now for the time being, Iraq, fortunately, has been spared. The Iranians there helped the resistance to defeat the extremists there. So, but in any case, Syria is a complicated country. You have all these minorities. You have educated Sunnis and ordinary Sunnis who do not agree at all with the ideas of Al-Qaeda. The reason why they scored a success in Syria, why they won, was because the country was broken. The people were brought to their knees. The economy was crushed because of American sanctions and because of the terrorism that was being imposed upon the people through Turkey and Jordan, and also through the no man's land in Iraq, between Iraq and Syria in the previous years, and through Lebanon in previous years. And of course, the Americans occupied the oil-rich areas along with the agriculturally important areas of Syria. So they kept the people starving and they stole their assets. That's it doesn't take a genius to understand why Syria collapsed. People are exhausted. And but I don't see, and this is why I'm saying this is a short-term tactical victory. I don't see this as an easy ride for Mr. Erdogan. He's riding a tiger. He, first of all, he did not anticipate owning Syria. He wanted a bigger piece outside of Idlib to use at the negotiating table. The sudden collapse of Syria was not expected by anyone. Now they have to take care of Syria. Now he has to take care of Syria, and I think the burden is simply too much for him and for the people of Turkey, the political burden, the economic burden, and the cultural fallout. We saw a couple of nights ago the Syrian terror groups spreading old footage of Egypt, unrest in Syria, unrest in Egypt. Why? Because they were trying to hide the unrest that was happening the other night in Syria. They wanted to distract attention away from that, but more importantly, they were also targeting Egypt. And that shows that the situation in Syria is going to complicate the situation across the region, whether in Egypt, whether in Saudi Arabia, whether in Jordan. So the countries that are most vulnerable to the spread of Al-Qaeda ideology are the countries in the US camp. And Turkey is vulnerable. Qatar will obviously be funding Al-Qaeda in Syria, but how much? How much are they going to spend? The Iranian oil is no longer going to go to Syria. Russian oil and Iraqi oil is no longer going to go to Syria. They have to replace that. They have to replace all the other assistance. And they're going to have to deal with an extremist and a diverse, different groups of extremist organizations that are already targeting the minorities, as we've seen in both to the east of the country, to the north of the country, and to the south of the country, and to the west of the country.
What he has mentioned in this speech, he said that we brought down the Assad regime. And here comes the question, what was the importance of the role of Israel in this whole situation? We saw they were incapable of defeating Hamas, Hezbollah, and even with those interactions, direct fight between Iran and Israel, without the United States, United Kingdom, France, Jordan, all of these countries together helping Israel, they were not capable to defend themselves. And right now, it seems to me that they're trying to brag about what has happened in Syria. And without Turkey being part of this operation, was the West capable of doing this?
No, this was a collective operation. The NATO, led by the United States, has been pursuing this since 2011. We know that. And the Israelis have always been supporting Al-Qaeda or Al-Qaeda and ISIS alongside the border. We know that. We have multiple statements by senior Israeli officials, by the former head of Mossad, Israeli newspapers, how Al-Qaeda and ISIS fighters that were stationed alongside the border with Syria, or at least along the occupied Golan Heights, that they were funded by the Israeli regime, that their wounded were treated by the regime, and that they had air support from the Israeli regime whenever the Syrian government would attack them. So the relationship between ISIS and Al-Qaeda is not new. The cooperation with these extremists existed in Jordan, in Israel, and in Turkey. And of course, they facilitated the aid that came from the Persian Gulf and from Europe and North America. We had tens of thousands of foreign fighters enter, mostly from Turkey, from across the world. And Western intelligence agencies were key to the movement of all those people. And Western intelligence agencies and the Israelis are always on the same page. They will never do anything that runs against the interests of the Israeli regime. So what happened, in addition to the sanctions and what I discussed earlier, and we were talking about earlier, was the fact that Hezbollah had to withdraw its troops from Syria to fight the war, or at least to protect Lebanon from the Israeli regime. And the Syrian government did not replace them adequately, and that was a part of the problem. But in any case, as soon as the ceasefire took place, and we saw before the ceasefire that Netanyahu says we need this ceasefire to deal with the Iranian threat. So, and then immediately after that, all this happened. And Turkish intelligence and Israeli intelligence cooperate very closely, and there's a lot of people going back and forth between the two, between Tel Aviv and Ankara. And we know Erdogan's relationship with Israel. We know the export of oil or the transport of oil. So it's clear that this was a collaboration. The Israelis have taken key areas in southern Syria. Nothing, Jolani or Erdogan have done nothing about it. And this therefore could not have been done without the support of Erdogan.
Right now, one of the main questions would be, what would be the future of Syria right now? Are they gonna divide Syria in different parts, or as Erdogan and his foreign minister are talking about, the sovereignty of Syria should be respected, and everybody would want that. But how is that possible right now? Are they gonna divide Syria, or we gonna have a single country, entire country together working as a country, not dividing in various, I don't know what various sections?
It's very ironic that Turkish leaders should speak about Syrian sovereignty, because they were the first to violate that sovereignty from 2011. I remember once being at a conference in Turkey on a panel, and it was quite large, the audience. And I said, look, I've been to Syria. The Syrians do not like these terror groups. And then the panelist beside me said, how do you get into Syria? And I said, well, I use my passport. You should try that every now and then. They've been entering Syria, funding ISIS, Al-Qaeda for many years. A reporter, Syrian Hashim, who was reporting for Press TV, a Lebanese American with 2 kids, she was on the Syrian-Turkish border when she reported that Turkish intelligence was using World Food Organization trucks to take in supplies, ammunition, and troops for ISIS in the battle for Ain al-Arab or Kobani. And then the Turkish government said that she's a spy. And on that same day, as soon as she heard that, she went on TV live and said, they're calling me a spy. I'm not a spy. I'm a journalist. I'm just reporting. And then hours later, she was killed by a truck while she was while she was in a car. So obviously, Turkish intelligence wanted to silence her. And that's not how you preserve a country's sovereignty. I find it difficult to imagine that. Well, if things depend on what happens in the coming months, because again, you have Al-Qaeda in Syria. They have to deal with these minorities. They have to deal with the Christians, the Jews, and all the others. Then there are the Kurds that they're battling right now in the east, and they also have to. We have to see how they're going to create a government and put a government into place, and who will be a part of that government. As things stand, I think you're going to see resistance grow across the country. Right now, from what I'm hearing from Syrian friends, is that in different cities, there is no one. And people themselves are setting up militias to protect themselves and their towns and their villages and their cities from both the extremists, but also thugs and thieves and gangs and mafia groups and so on. So the country has fallen apart. And the Israelis, of course, they've destroyed the infrastructure. The economy is broken. And if the Americans and the Europeans are in an interesting position. If they remove the sanctions, then they will empower Al-Qaeda. The same people who, according to their narrative, carried out 9/11, 7/7. If we accept their narrative to be the real narrative, or otherwise, many believe that Al-Qaeda did it in collaboration with elements within the intelligence agencies in the West. But in any case, if they remove the sanctions, they enable Al-Qaeda to spread. If they don't remove the sanctions, then under these circumstances and with all this internal unhappiness and unrest, I think it's going to be very difficult for them to preserve power. But I think that most Syrians definitely want to preserve the sovereignty of the state. And therefore, I find that if Al-Qaeda remains in power, then I think the chances for Syria to fall apart are greater. But if Al-Qaeda and its leaders and the foreign fighters are removed from power, then I think the state will probably will definitely be preserved.
How do you see the situation right now with Hezbollah in Lebanon? It seems that the French government is trying to do everything in order to put pressure on them. How do you find it right now?
It is definitely a difficult situation because Lebanon is now surrounded by Israel and Al-Qaeda. So it is a difficult situation. However, the burden of Syria is no longer on the shoulders of Hezbollah. Also, we have to keep that in mind. Syria has been a burden for Russia, for Iran, for Hezbollah, for Iraq, and that burden no longer exists. Hezbollah had to protect citizens from the extremists. The Iranians played their own role. The Russians played their own role. The Iraqis, the Iranians, the Russians, they provided fuel and a significant financial support to preserve the country. That burden has been removed from Iran. That burden has been removed from Hezbollah. It's been removed from Russia. And now the burden is on Mr. Erdogan and Qatar. And I don't think it's going to be that easy. It's going to be very difficult. So it is difficult for Hezbollah, but Hezbollah, they are very resourceful. They are very powerful. They have created an image for themselves across the world as the people who willingly sacrifice for the people of Gaza. The image, the stature of Hezbollah has grown immensely. Of course, they paid a heavy price, but Hezbollah is too powerful and it's too influential and it's too popular for the French to do a great deal about it. And we have to remember that this is not taking place, what's going on in West Asia is not taking place in a vacuum. The war in Ukraine is continuing. We're reaching the climax. It seems that Trump is not going to be able to end the war on the first day of his presidency, as we all, I think, assumed. And this is going to continue to deplete the energy and resources and capabilities of Western powers. France and the Germans and the Americans and the British, their relative power today is very different from what it was 3 years ago. And they have many challenges at home and abroad. So I don't think it's just Hezbollah that's weakened. The Israeli regime is severely weakened. All those who fought have been weakened. That's the nature of war. The Israeli regime today is despised across the world. Its economy is in ruins. Its military has taken a heavy beating. They can cheer because of their propaganda. They're constantly telling themselves that we won, but I think they do recognize that they haven't failed to make any inroads. And the very fact that the regime is constantly violating the ceasefire in Lebanon, they are strengthening the logic of Hezbollah among the Lebanese, that the Israeli regime cannot be trusted. The very fact that the West does not protect Lebanon, the very fact that the Lebanese army cannot protect Lebanon against these violations, again, reinforce the argument that Hezbollah has to remain powerful. And also the Israeli aggression against Syria, the fact that they have occupied a huge portion of Syria, in addition to what they occupied before, reinforces the argument that Hezbollah makes that the Israeli regime is not trustworthy. In my opinion, the Israeli regime has made a big mistake by destroying Syria's infrastructure. And they're making a big mistake by occupying new territory. Because what I can understand why they're doing this. Netanyahu wants to be seen as a conqueror at home and a powerful figure in order to remain in power. But what he's doing is that he's humiliating Erdogan, he's humiliating Giuliani, and he is also reinforcing the argument that the resistance has put forward all the way throughout this period, that the Israeli regime will use any opportunity possible for expansion. And again, that too strengthens Hezbollah's argument that it must remain armed.
When you hear Israelis talking about making a new alliance against Ansarullah in Yemen. Do you think, in your opinion, who's going to be in this alliance? Are we going to see Saudi Arabia, UAE, again being part of this operation?
Well, if Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates make the grave mistake of entering an alliance against Ansarullah, Ansarullah will destroy their oil assets, and that would wreck their economies. Their economies are completely dependent on energy, especially Saudi Arabia. So I find it hard to imagine that the Saudis would make such a. And Yemen is not like Syria. Yemen they're a very powerful force. They survived a genocidal war where the collective West was supporting Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, and the Saudis and the Emiratis spent hundreds of billions of dollars to undermine Ansarullah in Yemen, but they could never take the capital. Ansarullah today is much more powerful than what it was. We see the missiles that they're firing at the Israeli regime. So, and also anyone who joins Ansarullah or who joins a coalition against Ansarullah, they will be seen with contempt across the region and the world, because everyone knows that that Ansarullah has been defending the Palestinians and the people of Gaza during this period of time, whereas no one else was doing anything. Yemen is different from Syria. The demonization of Syria has been going on for 13 and 14 years, and it has been more successful because these oil and gas-rich dictatorships in the Persian Gulf region have tried very hard to make this a sectarian issue from the very beginning, and to use sectarian hatred and religious hatred in order to demonize the Syrian government and to turn ISIS and Al Qaeda into heroes. They were supporting ISIS and Al Qaeda, these different groups, and these terrorists that they were supporting, actually, they killed more Sunnis in Syria and Iraq than anyone else. The Sunni areas of Iraq were destroyed by ISIS. The Sunni areas were targeted more than anyone else by these extremist groups. But Syria, because it was a broken country, because it failed to be able to stand up economically, and because it was demonized so thoroughly, is a very different situation. It's a very different. It was a different situation compared to what we have in Yemen. Yemen is not seen in that light by people. So therefore, anyone who joins a coalition against Ansarullah will definitely be seen in a negative light by the people of their own countries.
Recently, we've heard from Putin. He said that what's going on right now between Russia and the West is a war against Russian wealth. And on the other hand, we know that there is a new agreement between Iran and Russia, which it seems they're going to sign it in Moscow on January 20th. What do we know about this agreement, Professor Marandi?
I don't know the details. I haven't seen the text. I haven't spoken to anyone about the content of the text, but it is an important agreement. And the very fact that the two countries have been speaking about it for so long, and that there's been so much speculation about it for so long, I think is evidence enough that this is an important agreement. And what Mr. Erdogan and the Americans and the Israelis did in Syria only serves to strengthen Iranian and Russian ties further. And in fact, it serves to create more concern in China about the actions of NATO, because we know that thousands of Chinese nationals have been trained by Turkish intelligence, and many thousands of Central Asians have also been trained, and that is a threat to China. It's a threat to countries in Central Asia. It's a threat to the Taliban, because the Taliban does not like Al-Qaeda. They are concerned about ISIS in Afghanistan. So, although there's a there are different factions in the Taliban, but the Taliban is concerned about these groups because they have over the past couple of years tried to challenge the Taliban in certain areas. So this is going to strengthen, I think, cooperation among Shanghai Cooperation Organization countries, and it's going to be a further challenge to Mr. Erdogan and those who are supporting these groups. But in any case, I think it's a very important document, and I probably, when it's signed, that we'll be hearing more details.
On the other hand, you're hearing from Donald Trump that he's talking about the Panama Canal, Greenland, and all of it. Do you think that it seems to me that the fight between the United States and China has already started even before Donald Trump taking out office in the United States? And on the other hand, we know that Iran and Russia, both of these two governments, officially stated that they're willing to negotiate on Iran, on the nuclear program and the difficulties they're having in the region, maybe, and Russia on the situation in Ukraine. If they want to fight with China, and they know how important Iran is for China, and do they have any sort of strategy in this type of, is Donald Trump going to talk with Iranian? Is that going to influence the situation between Iran, Russia, and China? These are huge questions right now in the mind of the people in the West.
No, the United States is not going to be able to create space between Iran and its friends. That's just simply not possible. Whether Russia or China or any other country that has treated Iran with respect at a time when the Americans and the Europeans were trying to undermine the country, that's something that we Iranians will remember. And there's no chance that the Iranians are going to come to trust Trump or anyone else in the United States or in European capitals anytime soon, after all they've done to the country, after all the harm they've caused. The Iranians made huge concessions in the nuclear deal, enormous concessions. It's still being argued in Iran about the JCPOA is still being, the people are arguing about it, about its positive and negative characteristics. But the fact is that whether it was a good deal or a bad deal, or probably something in between, as I believe, Iranians gave huge concessions, and the Americans and the Europeans never intended to abide by their commitments. They never intended to do so. From the very beginning under Obama, they violated the deal, just like the Minsk Accords. They were never serious. And that's because of their exceptionalism. That's because they consider themselves to be superior. They consider themselves to have exceptional rights. So when you're dealing with countries that believe they have exceptional rights, which believe that they can violate their commitments, yet they expect the other side to abide by their commitments, how can you ever trust them? How can you ever move close to them? You have to treat them with great caution. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why the West is on the decline, because no one trusts them anymore. It's not only because they support genocide. It's not only because it's never-ending wars. It's not because of their behavior towards the global South. Trump is more crude in his language when he speaks about Greenland or Panama. But the mentality of the United States has always been that the whole of Latin America is our backyard. It's the whole notion of having a backyard is outrageous. But that is, Trump is basically saying explicitly what the collective mentality of the elites in the West are, and the United States in particular is. So I think that the Iranians will continue to improve their relations with Russia, with China, with countries in the global majority, with India. The North-South corridor for Iran is very important. But if Iran is able to come to terms with the West, if it's able to have an agreement with the West that is meaningful, it will do it. That's not new. That's that was 3 years ago. I was the media advisor for the Iranian nuclear team during the negotiations in Vienna, and at the middle of the negotiations, the war in Ukraine began, and I told a Wall Street Journal reporter there that Europe, the EU was at its height in the 1990s. They were euphoric about the future. It was the spring of Europe. And I said to him that this decade will be the winter of Europe, because the war with Russia is not going to end with their victory. He believed at that time that they would win. This was around the time when I think that Biden said we'll turn the ruble into rubble. And I was telling him that, look, you couldn't overthrow Iran. You haven't been able to overthrow Cuba or Venezuela. How are you going to overthrow the Russians? But in any case, I said that if you do a deal, not that I sympathize with the Europeans or the Americans over Ukraine, but if you do revive the nuclear deal, then instead of, because of the sanctions and because of your energy problems, and right now we're seeing how Europe is suffering, you could have Iranian fuel. You could have import Iranian oil and gas. Now we've had 3 years since, it's been 3 years since then. They could have invested in Iran's gas industry and Iran's oil industry, and they could have dealt with some of their problems. But at the end of the day, the negotiations continued. They came to the EU gave, on the last day of the negotiations, a text was given to all the negotiating teams by the EU. The Iranians took it to Tehran. They changed 2 or 3 words, sent it back to the EU. Joseph Borrell did an interview. He said the Iranian demands are reasonable. Everyone thought we had a deal. And I was planning to go back to Vienna to discuss the deal with journalists. But the Americans balked. Biden didn't agree to it. And so Biden sacrificed Europe, and both over Russia, Nord Stream 2, and so on. And he sacrificed Europe with regards to the JCPOA. Europe's economic situation would have been very different today if they had signed the deal. They agreed to the text. Joseph Borrell said this text is fine. But the Americans, so when you have a United States like this, that is untrustworthy, that doesn't even show respect for its own allies, then because the Europeans, obviously the sanctions hurt Iranians, but they also hurt the Europeans. But Biden was unwilling to listen to his own European allies. Borrell was saying that we're fine, and this text is fine, and we hope that the Americans agree to it as soon as possible. So again, they fail to abide by their commitments. They're not serious about their commitments. They sacrifice their own allies. So it's going to be very difficult for Iran to come to any meaningful agreement with the United States, especially an agreement that would be somewhat, let's say, comprehensive in scope. The larger the agreement, the more difficult it is to trust Americans. So I find it difficult right now to envisage a situation where we have a significant agreement with the United States. But if the United States shifts gear, changes course, the Iranians will take that without a doubt into consideration. But that will not affect Iran's relations with China and Russia.
How about Iran's relation with the countries in the West Asia? How Donald Trump would influence that sort of relationship? We had a rapprochement between Iran and Saudi Arabia. The situation right now, I do believe, between Iran and Turkey is not that bad. But we know that Iranian and Turks are brothers, and after all. But how do you see Donald Trump's policies in the Middle East, in the West Asia? Is that going to complicate the situation for the countries?
Well, Iran's relationship with Turkey have always been good, even at the height of the dirty war in Syria, when Erdogan himself was funding ISIS and ISIS was carrying out the most outrageous atrocities. Iran put that in a box. Mr. Erdogan is not Turkey. Turkey for Iran is a very important country. The culture is very similar. The Sufi culture of Turkey is very similar to Iranian culture. That's why if you travel back and forth from Turkey and Iran, you'll feel very much at home because of the similarities. Of course, ever since 2011, we've had the rise of Salafism in Turkey. And I think this is going to be increasingly a problem. And many people are concerned about that. Many of my Turkish friends have said explicitly that this is becoming a serious problem. And I think now it's going to become even more problematic for the people. So Iran is not going to sacrifice its relationship with Turkey because of Mr. Erdogan. That's just not meaningful. But it remains to be seen what Trump does in West Asia. To say that he's going to be more Zionist than Biden, I don't think that's very meaningful. Biden himself said very explicitly that he's a Zionist. His two closest the two closest people to him with regards to foreign policy were Jake Sullivan and Antony Blinken, both Jewish Zionists, whose number one priority is without a doubt Israel rather than the United States. So, and the national security advisor, there's not much, you can't go much higher than that. And remember, he is the person who said Al-Qaeda on February the 12th, 2012, that Al-Qaeda is on our side in Syria. So I can't imagine Trump being more Zionist than the Zionists. And in addition to that, I think there are two things I should add. One is that Iranians don't like Trump, obviously. He murdered General Soleimani and his companions and his Iraqi allies. However, what Biden did to Gaza and to Lebanon and to the region and to Syria is far worse, and to Yemen is far worse than anything Trump has done. The genocide, the Holocaust, the slaughter, the destruction, the devastation, the ruin of so much of Western Asia was carried out by Biden. Without Biden, it wouldn't have happened. Without Jake Sullivan, without Antony Blinken, none of this could have happened. So I think it's the dislike for the Biden regime is much greater than the dislike for Trump. And then the second point is that the world that we live in today is very different from the world that Trump was dealing with 8 years ago or 4 years ago. Things have changed enormously. And the United States cannot tolerate further war. The situation inside the United States is not good. As we all know, everywhere things are getting worse. But the Americans are very dissatisfied. The divisions at home are huge. The rise of China continues, despite the fact that China has its own problems. But it's not waging wars. At least it's dealing with its problems, unlike the United States. U.S. problems in Ukraine are only intensifying. And Biden is making sure it gets worse. Biden is ensuring that the situation in Ukraine gets as bad as possible. And I think that's what Biden is also doing in West Asia. I think that the overthrow of the Syrian government is part of the Biden strategy to complicate matters further in West Asia, to bog down Trump. I think that they're doing, right now we have further sanctions that are going to be imposed on Russia, the Russian energy sector by the Americans. Trump, the Biden team says they're doing it to strengthen Trump's hand at the negotiating table. Well, if Trump wanted to do it, he would have imposed the sanctions himself. What they're doing is that they're trying to make sure that it becomes increasingly difficult for Trump to disengage. So it's going to be very difficult for Trump. He's going to be in a very difficult situation. I think that is something that he'll always have to keep in mind whenever people are pushing him towards greater confrontation with the resistance. The resistance is not weak. We've been hearing a lot of this nonsense over the past couple of weeks. And it reminds me of how the Russians were losing the war in Ukraine for the last 3 years, and how the ruble will be turned into rubble, and how the Russians are devastated. And then suddenly over the past couple of months, we've seen the sudden shift in the Western narrative about the reality in Ukraine. I think that Western leaders should not take the wishful thinking of Western media and Western think tanks too seriously.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Professor Marandi, for being with us.
Before I'll do this, I need to just share with you some housekeeping items. On December 28th, nighttime here at 8 p.m. It will be 9 a.m. the next day. Is the optics of it. Topic here, and we're going to start with the key question, of course, and I'm going to share this with you right here. Questions: how serious is this development? I mean, we're talking about the downing of a fighter jet. Okay. Second thing, that's beside the point. Second thing is the optics of it. It doesn't matter. Doesn't matter whether it was shut down or it was a mechanical or error, whatever. The optics of it. Like I always say, in international relations, context matters. Something of this magnitude matters. Third question is, are the Houthis, or Ansarullah that is, in possession of advanced systems? Because to take down an F-18, you have to have an advanced system. And those the questions I'm going to try to provide you an answer with in this analysis that I am going to be doing for you guys. So, all right, as I mentioned, Houthis announce. Let me see if I have I did have some pictures. All right, let me see some pictures here. Now, this is the missile system that was used, and I'm going to get into all that. So suffice it to say, for now, is that the Houthis announced the downing of that this shut down an F-18 Hornet while trying to confront both the United States and Britain. Because Britain, you know, of course, Britain will have to always get its nose involved in things that doesn't belong to, but Britain has no choice but to follow its master. So, because both those countries, meaning the US and Britain, launched air raids on Yemen of late. So now, as I said, beside the questions I ask, how accurate is this? Okay, well, the question is, will the Houthis just come up with something like this? In other words, will they lie about it? Or was it something else? And this is what we're going to try and to figure out in this analysis, because it's very, very, very important. Well, the Brigadier General, spokesperson of the Houthis military, his name is Yahya Sari. He's the one who announced the downing of the F-18 as of Saturday, which was, recently, of course. Of course, in addition to the targeting of the F-18, it was also the targeting of the USS Harry Truman. And I have a picture here for you guys to see. This is a picture of the USS Harry Truman.
Merry Christmas.
It was also targeted during that time. when exactly, it didn't disclose that one. So, and this, the operations of the Houthi succeeded in pushing the sort of thwarting, if I may use the term, the U.S.-British attacks on Yemen. So, and this is exactly what the Yemeni spokesperson is saying, is that any, and I quote here, any American-British folly will be met with a strong response. So, and that tells you just where things are. So now, of course, you have to take into consideration other events happening around the same time. One of them has to do with the launching of a missile on Tel Aviv, which I will get into later. I decided to do this in two parts. The first part addressing the F-18 Hornet, and the second part addressing which took 2 days prior to the downing of the F-18, the launching of a missile by the Houthis on Tel Aviv, and it landed in Tel Aviv. Now, right immediately after this, after the downing of the F-18, the Central Command, or U.S., let's just call it the U.S. military, did mention that an F-18 Hornet fighter has mistaken, I quote here, let me read it word for word. On Sunday morning, the U.S. military announced that an F-18 Hornet fighter jet has been mistakenly shut down over the Red Sea, forcing the pilots to skydive, end of quote. Okay. And I'm going to just go with this argument here, guys. If it was a mistake, why will the U.S. respond as of yesterday to attacking certain locations in Yemen? Okay, why the U.S. didn't respond, let's say, a week ago? If the argument is, well, because we wanted to attack the Houthis and so forth. Why didn't they do it a week ago? So to me, it just didn't make any sense. And that is why the idea of, oh, it was a friendly fire or friendly mistake, but at the same time, we're still going to attack or respond or raid the Houthis. Well, why would you do that if it's not a response for downing the F-18? What do you guys think? Because I need to have your input into this. I know it's very sort of challenging point, but in your opinion, was the F-18 shut down? When I say shut down, a missile was used, some sort of advanced system to bring it down. Just yes or no. Please answer yes or no in the chat box. So please, just for me to get you a part of the conversation like we always do. All right, let me see. I'm looking at your answers, guys, here on the chat box. And so, was the Houthis downed the F-18, or was it a friendly fire per se, as the Pentagon claimed? Okay, Cap, you say yes. Francis Tango, no idea. You got a point there, Francis. You know, some might be, which is smart to be skeptical about things till you find the facts. So, Rafael Legon, you say it was shut down. Bebs, you say, I think it was ZN. You know, I don't want to put that. I'm going to share it on the screen here. Just, you know how it is with YouTube. So, which would not be surprising. You know why? You know, actually, you brought in a good point. Babes, you brought in a good point. You know what? Here is why. I'm going to tell you guys about one event that took place way back. USS Liberty. What do you guys know about that? And what happened? So it was a good point. Babes, you brought on a good point. Compare this to what took place with the USS Liberty. You all know what happened with USS Liberty. So that is why you have to really keep your mind open just to understand where things are. So, because for the Pentagon to say, well, it was a friendly fire, well, wait a minute. We're talking about some advanced systems here, and how this friendly fire will mess up an F-18 that is all over the radars and so forth. So that's just, to me, the argument doesn't hold, and that's why I have my own. It's kind of the way I see it. So. And of course, the military, the Pentagon that is saying that the whole incident happened during the a mission that the fighter jet was on as part of the training regarding the USS aircraft Harry Truman, that is. And they explained that one of the escort ships, the missile cruiser Gettysburg, accidentally fired at the plane, destroying it. It's just mind-boggling. Accidentally. Now, those missiles that will be launched from the cruiser, from the, the missile cruisers that will be launched from the destroyers will have to be, the button will have to be pressed on. It ain't going to happen on its own. And this is why the Central Command explanation just doesn't make any sense. So that is why, and this is why, here is where, to me, when I put the question mark about the statements of the Pentagon or Central Command, it's because of this. On Saturday, the same day after the downing of the F-18, Central Command announced precision, it's called the precision airstrikes on Saturday on a missile storage facility and command and control facility run by the Houthis in Yemen, capital Sana'a. Once again, why would you attack that if you weren't for responding to the downing of the F-18? So, of course, the Pentagon or Central Command will have to give a different explanation as to, the whole idea of the strike or the airstrike that is was at disrupting and weakening the Houthis' operations, including the attacks on the U.S. warships and merchant ships in the southern Red Sea in Bab el-Mandeb. Let me see if I have I think I do. I kept those pictures for a reason, just for you guys in case we need. Yeah, right there. Look at here the map, guys. Look at where Yemen is. Look at where Bab el-Mandeb. This is where some of the attacks the U.S. conducted. Well, if we are to say the mighty of the U.S. military, I couldn't even lift the blockade on the Red Sea that the Houthis imposed, then where is this mighty military power and so forth? That just to me defies logic. And this is why I would say I will not believe what the Central Command or the Pentagon statements are. Those are meant to deceive us, all of us, because the optics of it on the international stage. Just take a step back, guys. Take a step back and consider and think of how it will be perceived that a group, Houthis in this case, was able to shut down an F-18 Hornet fighter jets. Those are advanced fighter jets. Because the logical question we ought to ask about this, how were the Houthis able to do this? Because this is not about a drone. This is not about a rocket. There will have to be something a little bit more sophisticated, like a missile. Now, the next question is the Houthis are in possession of advanced systems that they never wanted to disclose? And now it's becoming clear as to what is happening. And that's the only, literally, the only explanation I could think of logically. So, for them to attack even the aircraft carrier, it says a lot. It says a lot about that. So, and of course, this comes on the heels of what took place 2 days ago, or 2 days prior to this incident, when a missile launched from Yemen hit Tel Aviv. And I have a picture of the missile right here. This is called the Palestine II hypersonic missile. Once again, you guys, just think about it. Just think of it's logic. Don't have to be genius though. It's common sense. Is this means now that the Houthi is in possession of advanced systems? If so, where did they get that from? Was it domestically produced? I don't think so, because you need a lot of time and testing and so forth. I think they were provided. By whom? It's an open question mark. This is where that challenge is. It's because now, of course, and this leads me to the Israel aspects of it. Given what the US is doing with Britain, thinking that they could really intimidate the Houthis, they couldn't so far. Look how long it has been. And the blockade, the Houthis that posed on it still stand till today. We couldn't lift that. The British couldn't. Well, the British are useless anyway. That's almost like what becomes of Europe right now. So, and speaking of that, before I forget, be on the lookout I did a video for you guys, recorded one on Germany. What's going on? It's going down. The UK is no different. In this case, for us, we're saying that, well, we're going to have this mighty military and all that, but we couldn't even lift the blockade in the Red Sea. So, and this is why, as I said, 2 days prior, the Houthis launched a missile on Tel Aviv. They were about, I think, and I'm going to share the link with you, as far as there were 30 injured into that, and I think some death that happened into that one. And this was announced by the Israelis themselves. Now, where is the challenge of the Israelis regarding this aspect of why the missile was able to make it through? The Israelis themselves are saying, when I say Israelis, I'm referring to the government, but mainly the military intelligence within the IDF. What they're saying is that the Israeli military, the apparatus, all of it, failed to intercept a missile from Yemen launched by the Houthis in Tel Aviv. It was sent to the area of Jaffa area. So, and this was reported in the Israeli media. So because you couldn't hide something like that, and you won't be able to hide something like that. Let me see if I have a picture of it. No, I don't. Sorry. No. So the idea, and this is why Israel responded and so forth. But that's not about all this, because here is where the problem for Israel. The problem is that the Israelis are having a hard time. When I say Israelis, I'm referring to the intelligence, military and civilian, Mossad included. They're having a hard time allocating the locations of where those missiles are in Yemen. So, and this was sort of disclosed by the Israeli government itself. So, and by the way, there is not a confirmation, but a statement that this type of rocket, the Palestine, so let me show you the picture again. Palestine 2, right here. This one here, guys. This one, Palestine rocket, so was developed during the Israeli war on Gaza. It reaches its final speed of 16 Mach, which makes all, listen this carefully, guys, makes all interceptor systems in the region unable to counter it. And this is the reason why the Israel was failed to intercept this particular missile. This is where the difference is. It was reported by an expert, a military expert, by the name of, I think I looked him up. It's not, I think, I did look him up. He's a colonel. His name is Mujib Shamsan. So, and I checked him out, checked his credentials, and he's good. He's good. So the argument was that this colonel, he pointed that the THAAD systems, which is the air defense system, the U.S. THAAD, which the Israelis brought in from the U.S. The U.S. provided the Israelis this to protect. It has a maximum interception, a speed of only 9 Mach. This missile that was launched from Tel Aviv has 16. So it tells you right there will be no compatibility, no system in the region that exists there will be able to counter that one. And the question, once again, here are the Houthis in possession of those advanced systems to address this particular attacks or operations, whatever term you want to use. So, and all this falls within the arguments of the geopolitical shift that is taking place right now in the region. We're talking about Syria. Why? Because Israel wants to take a certain parts in Syria. The Russians have already warned the Israelis because Russia still has some assets on Syrian territory, even though they are moving into Libya. But this is far beyond. When you start seeing an F-18 going down, when you start seeing a missile hitting Tel Aviv, this is now, we're talking a different phase. Is this a sign or a hint that the Houthis are moving into the next level? Is this a sign and a hint for the changes that took place in Syria? It's not going to bode well for both Israel and the U.S. And when I say the U.S., I am referring to the U.S. location, military installations in the region. We have about 30 there. And I remember sharing the map with you. All those dynamics will make you now think about, if the Houthis were able to do this, that means we are entering a different phase of the confrontation. And something that we've been involved in since we called on the coalition to impose sanctions and try to lift the blockade in the Red Sea, but we failed miserably. And again, this is no different than what we did back in Iraq, that is, what we did in Afghanistan, what we did in Yemen before, and other Somalia and other locations. We never end up winning. We're only getting involved in the conflict, because that was the whole idea of it. It's not to win, but rather drag the conflicts. And the decision was made back in early 50s. I remember I mentioned this before. I'm not going to be repeating myself here, just for you to have an understanding of the mindset, how it is with the Washington thinking is not about winning conflict, because we can fight. The notion of fight that you and I understand it in its traditional sense, we can't do that. Even now, you think about the recruitments here in the US for military, they had to lower the standards. Literally, cutting them by half. It's not a laughing matter, but hey, this is what you get for having a corrupted government. Yeah. And it's reflecting not only on that aspect of the military recruitment, but reflecting also on the economy, reflecting on the social setting, reflecting on so many things. We don't have yet what, for example, Germany now it's going through. Well, we don't have what UK is going through, France, Italy, Spain, you name it. You all know about Europe. And this is the same arguments I've made as far as us, the United States, pushing tensions into the Far East, especially now with these two major developments in the Philippines regarding the new missile system, which, by the way, they want this missile system to go about way out, about 32 to 36 nautical miles away from the Philippines. Why the heck would you want to have that for, unless you want it for some specific reason? We don't know what it is. And second thing, the presence of, or the discovery of the military-grade uranium in the Philippines, since Philippines doesn't have uranium. Why the heck is a military-grade uranium doing there? And all the whole idea is the tensions being expanded. Now, to go back to this issue of the downing of the F-18, it's no different as far as the optics of it. When the world sees that an F-18 is being shut down, it tells you right there. Now we entered a new phase. So how long we've been bombing Yemen? Let's just, did we achieve anything? And how come, here is what I spent a lot of time in Yemen back then. So I used to travel a lot. Wonderful people, by the way, very down to earth. Yemen is one of the poorest countries in the Arab world. Yeah, you won't believe what other Muslim countries were doing to Yemen behind closed doors. I was there. Shame on the United Arab Emirates. Shame on the Saudis. Shame on the Jordanians. Yeah, they were providing the airspace, providing logistics, providing everything, even supporting the blockades of food that won't get into through the Aden airport and Hodeidah airports into Yemen. And yet, what have we achieved? Nothing. Saudis weren't able to fight in Yemen without the support of the US. Who was providing the targets? We were. And who was even flying some of those planes? Some of us. So when those Muslims are saying, oh, unity, brotherhood, it's nonsense. It's a damn hypocrisy. Because Muslims are known for talking, but when it comes to action, that's when you find out. It's like what the last emperor of Rome, Marcus Aurelius, said, watch what a man does, not what he says. Muslim countries are nothing but all this hypes about God and whatever. You guys got the idea. You got the idea. And now here you have a group that is standing firm, strong. How is that? We couldn't defeat them. So the success of it's and still the idea of taking down an F-18, it tells you some changes have happened. Same arguments can be made about the targeting of Tel Aviv by a missile from the Houthis, a hypersonic, that is, because that missile it was used, it was a type of hypersonic, and the defense system in Israel couldn't intercept that one. As a matter of fact, the intelligence, as I mentioned earlier, they are struggling to find out the locations of. They just couldn't. And if I know one thing I've learned about the Yemenis, they are fierce fighters. You won't intimidate them. They don't get intimidated. And this scare of death, whatever, it doesn't mean a thing to them. But they will fight you till the end. Same thing was in Afghanistan. So same thing was in Iraq. There are some of us in the West do not understand this kind of how people see life differently than we do. Because they don't live in this comfort. They don't live in this, if they find something to eat, they are happy about it. If they don't, life goes on. So if the Americans or the Brits or the Germans or the French or the Italians or whomever come over with that attitude of superiority, it doesn't cut it. And this now is an example of really this shifting landscape, the geopolitical landscape that is in a region that will now change the trajectory. Because now you're going to have to see it this way. If a conflict erupts, the targeting of the 30 bases in the region, West Asia or Middle East, that is, with American presence there, and those Arab systems or Arab monarchies that have been supporting, Qatar behind closed doors, cutting a deal with the US for the largest military presence, Saudis behind closed doors, Jordanians, because it was never about the population, it was about the survival of the regime, that is. Even Egypt, even Turkey. I'll go as far as saying, you remember the video I did for you guys about the Azerbaijan and Turkey providing oil and gas to Israel in conjunction with the ongoing war in Gaza. Well, if you take stand, why would you want to do that? Or you say we stand for this and you do the opposite? Hypocrisy of the highest order. That is where the problem is. So now, just when you think about the statements by the Pentagon and the Central Command, if you only know how the media is, and this is not just in the US, look at just in the West, when I say Western world, that is, look at in Europe, for example, especially now, I look at Germany because I did the research, guys. I did the research before I did the video for your recorded one, that is. So, and by the way, my editor removed the soundtrack, and thank you guys for sharing your feedback, because your feedback matters to me. And so I asked him, please remove that one. So the idea of, you look at where Germany is going, economically speaking, but socially also, the social, where things are headed. Their own making. Of course, we have to facilitate that behind closed doors, because we never wanted to see Germany moving forward. So the same argument I will make about what's going on in West Asia, or these attacks on the Houthis on the Red Sea. It's just because we wanted to maintain the tensions going on by pulling in other countries into the conflict. We don't do the fighting. No. Same thing I see now unfolding in the Philippines. So that is where the key arguments into this. By the way, guys, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel if you have not done so. I think we're going to miss the target of 100K by the end of the year. But hey, life goes on. So I would greatly appreciate if you could subscribe if you are here for the first time. So, Francis Tango, thank you so much. Appreciate you, man. And your question from you is, what kind of weapons do you need to shoot down an F-18? What do you guys think? Well, you need a missile that is heat sensor that will follow the plane, because the fighter jets emits a lot of heat and so forth. It will be a sensor missiles that will fire, that will track all that till it hits the target. So basically, it will be advanced systems. You can't do it with drones. You can't do it with the rockets, whatever. It has to be some advanced systems. So, and if the Houthis were able to take it down, then it must have something advanced. And now that, was it provided to them from which I believe it was? Yes, they could work on their own. It's like what Hezbollah did in Lebanon. They developed their own type of rockets and all that stuff. But this kind of level of Mach 16 that requires a lot of technology and knowledge and so forth. So, but the possibility is there. So, Rafael, thank you once again, Francis. Appreciate you. Thank you, Rafael. You wrote, did you realize that quietly everybody is referring to Iran as a nuclear state? And today they are talking about Iran hitting us in a half an hour. Wow. First of all, thank you for your super sticker, Rafael. Yeah, that means it has always been that argument. Does Iran already have nuclear weapons? Or is it on the threshold of building a nuclear weapon? So, what do you guys think? What do you guys think of Rafael's question here? In your opinion, do you believe Iran already in possession of a nuclear weapon? Yes or no? Let me just see your... I'm going to make the same argument for two countries, North Korea and Israel. Let me just see what you guys have here. Karakulak, you say no. Tony, you say no. Army with Harmony, you say no. The Great Snafu, you say no. Atinwu, you say no. Hangs, Iran, you say yes. Interesting. To me personally, and again, based on what I know, it's they don't have it. That's my opinion, and again, my personal opinion. But they are on a threshold of doing that, if that is one. Yeah, that's the way I look at it. Now, this is different than North Korea and Israel. Now that I know for a fact. So, let me share this with you guys. Sorry, not this one right here. Lens Inc. Thank you so much.
Ramifications worldwide of an obvious loss for the U.S. empire. Let's talk. It's one thing to talk about the Ukraine project and the potential outcome over the course of the last 4 years, when the neocons were in there, the neocons were in their ascendancy, right? They were really, I mean, the last 4 years, they've been, since say, particularly, say, starting with the Clintons, the Cold War neocons. So we can talk, there's different kind of neocons, in the 80s, certainly the Reagan administration was all over South America doing horrible, terrible things, killing death squads, you name it. But that foreign policy blob neocon has evolved into something really interesting. It has been taken over, interesting one word to use, it's been taken over by the Cold War neocons, right? The Scoop Jackson neocons, I call them. There was if you can look him up, a famous Democrat named Henry Scoop Jackson. And even now, there's a neocon institute in London called the Scoop, I think it's the Scoop Jackson Society or Scoop, and it is home of the neocon, the Cold War neocons, right? Those who are anti-Russia first, anti-China, they're anti-Russia first through ninth. Everything else starts at 10. And now they're sure China, whatever, but first and foremost, they hate Russia, the Scoop Jackson Democrats, right? And so they've been plotting on Russia for a long time. And, they had their devious and evil scheme. They're going to take the Russians down. And of course, they built a narrative that made it easy for them, because the narrative was that the Republicans were weak. That the Russians were weak. And of course, all they'd have to do is set a trap. And the Russians, being that they're not very bright, mentally and emotionally and everything else inferior, will set a trap because we're so smart. We're Wile E. Coyote, super genius. And then we'll set a trap, and those stupid old Ruskies will fall into the trap, right? Again, been down this road a couple times historically with the Western Europeans, haven't we? Okay, so now here we are. Their trap springs, and the Russians step right in, and into the Russians go into Ukraine. Well, I put it to you like this. There's certain things you can do where you lean too far over and there's no way to lean back, right? There's certain decisions that you can make that the outcome will seal your fate, and you're better off not to make that decision. If you don't pull the trigger on that, you're not going to put yourself in a risk reward situation where you either win it all or lose it all. And perhaps if you haven't evaluated the odds of which one you're going to get, you're even in worse shape. So my point being this: the empire was doing their things. The Ruskies were growing. The Chinese were growing. Other people were growing, doing their things. The Iranians, despite all the sanctions, they're growing. Everybody's growing. But the U.S. empire didn't really grasp that. They were stuck in a 1991 through 2000 mentality where everything was perfect for them, because the Russians were the Chinese were extremely poor and the Russians were totally compromised. In fact, so much so that all of these economic minions and economic hitmen from the U.S. empire and the British Empire went to Russia and was just basically pillaging the country after the fall of the end of the USSR. Okay, so this is what's going on. So now their mentality is of the 1990s Russia, and they could never grasp that. Russia under President Putin has dramatically increased its its military, its technological, and of course abilities. And what they forget is that Russia had always had a very powerful diplomatic corps, and they always were able to build a strong alliances, particularly in what was then called the Third World, which was every place but the U.S. and its allies. And the Third World were the ones that were preyed on by the U.S. and its allies. We called it colonialism. So at any rate, And they're stuck in this mentality. So they're like, okay, we'll draw Russia in and Russia will go down. Well, they drew Russia in. And it's kind of like this. I've made this comparison. You know, when a evil regime is in charge of a regime that the people don't want in charge of a country, and the people come to the, you know, they surround the Capitol and they say, we demand that the president, you know, resign, and the Congress resign, everybody, Parliament resigns, whoever. And the people in power say to the army, surround us and protect the Capitol. Okay, so they protect the parliamentary building, whatever it is. And at some point, the people are like, no, we want to end. The government is put into a position where they got to say, fire on the people, right? Because the people aren't going to stop, and they got the military, and they say to the military, fire, open fire on the crowds. The problem you have with giving that order is this. One or two things are going to happen. Either they're going to fire on the crowds, and the crowds are going to run, but they ain't going to give up. They'll be back, trust me. Or, and this is the big one, the military will say, that's a little too far. We're not going to do it. And when that happens, the government falls. As soon as the government tells the troops, fire on the populace, fire on the crowds, if the troops say no, the government falls, because they don't have, what is a government? A government is having a monopoly on the use of violence. Really, to some extent it is. Why is it that you do what your government tells you to do? Because they can come arrest you. They can take your liberty. They can take you away. They can use violence. They can use physical force. A government, at the foundation of a government, unfortunately, is a monopoly of violence. Now, there are other things, but that's it. And once they don't have that, because they say to the troops, fire, and the troops say, I ain't going to listen anymore, they're risking it all. Why did I say that? Same thing with Ukraine. As long as the U.S. was in a theoretical war with the Russians, figuring out how to undermine the Russians, how to deviously plot on the Russians. There was a 2019 article, a document that was written by the RAND Corporation, funded by the Pentagon, and it was like how to unbalance Russia, how we're going to screw over Russia. Okay, as long as they were writing documents about how to unbalance and overextend Russia, that's what it was called, it was all theoretical. Once they got what they wanted in Ukraine, it was like giving the order to the troops, right? If the troops say no, you lose it all. You're gambling everything. So once they said, okay, we're withdraw Russia in, and it's going to be an open proxy war. By an open proxy war, I mean, we're not going to try to hide it. It's not going to be one of those proxy wars where we deny it. No, we're going to be proud of it. And we're going to go. And the other thing is this, a proxy war is what? Plausible deniability, where I can plausibly deny that I'm at war with Russia. I'm not at war with Russia. Well, but those are all your guns and training and everything. No, no, no. I'm just providing stuff to this democracy to protect itself. So generally, what superpowers will do is back away from that as far as they can and provide the weapons, but pretend that they're not. Okay, the U.S. was wide open right now. This is an open proxy war, and we're unapologetic, and yes, we're doing it, and we're going to, and they even said, we're going to do it to weaken Russia. We're out, this is great. We're killing Russians, etc. Right? So it was the most open proxy war I've ever seen. Okay, so now it's all the way. Not only are they devious and evil, they're stupid. So now there's no plausible deniability, and it's an open proxy war. And to make it worse, the U.S. brought in all their allies. Here, France, Germany, all of you guys, everybody come on. It's Russia's time. We're going to take them out. So they made it clear that the bully and all of his friends, the mean girl and all of her friends, came in the cafeteria, and they're going to beat up the other little girl with the ponytails, right? It's a perfect movie, teenage movie, right? So that's it. They made it so open. So now they're just doubling. It was really stupid. Doubling down, betting everything, right? Even at home, one could argue politically, they bet everything. I mean, politically, the ruling elite of Europe bet everything. And in losing, they're going to lose too. They're going to lose everything. They bet everything, they'll lose everything, right? That's what it is. If I say 42 black and I put every dime I got down, then either I'm going to win it all, very, very not, a very, very low probability of that, or I'm going to win it all. There ain't no in between. And the way they gambled, there ain't no in between for the neocon project. Because of the way they did it so brazenly. We're at war with Russia. I mean, they just like stood up on the rooftops. We're at war with Russia, and we want not, I don't care who knows, we're at war with Russia, and we want everyone to know. And the reason they wanted to do that in the same way, you know, normally people are like, why are you guys so brazen? Shouldn't you be a little bit more clandestine about this? But no, just like when they blew up Nord Stream, and they're all like, yeah, hey, it's gone, hooray, woo-hoo-hoo. And the guy Sikorsky, the Polish foreign minister, whatever the hell he is, defense minister now, is writing tweets, yay, thanks America for blowing it up. Why is that? Because the sociopath and the psychopathic serial killer always wants attention. And when they commit the murder, they want everybody to know they did it deep down inside. Maybe on the surface, they kind of don't want to get caught in a way, but deep down inside, they want everybody to know it's me. Look at me. The sociopath wants to feel entitled above everybody else, and they want everybody to know that they're the one committing the crime deep down inside. Talking like old investigator now, aren't I? So anyway. So these sociopaths, Biden and his flock of neocon sociopaths that have now ascended to really leading a foreign policy, they wanted everybody to know it, so they didn't try to hide it. So it was everybody in the world, look at us, we're taking out Russia. That made it even worse, right? Everybody, guess what? We're all going to beat up Garland. If you lose that fight, man, you look bad. And so where we are now is this, a couple of things going on. They bet everything, the farm. We're taking out Russia, we're beating Russia. And Russia said, we'll stand our ground, because Russia had a big advantage. We're going to beat Russia where? On Russia's doorstep, in Russia's weather, in Russia's turf, in Russia's terrain, speaking Russia's language, using lots of Russian equipment. I mean, you know, talk about an endeavor that was doomed to failure, but they decided they're going to go to the border of a superpower and fight that superpower. And man, there was never a chance they were going to win, but these sociopaths, it's a little, you know, it's a little, you need some clear thinking to figure out things like that. They're delusional at best. So anyway, so now that's the setup. You've bet everything. But that's the setup. The neocons bet it all. They bet their reputations in U.S. political circles and world political circles, right? Because everybody's going to look at them at some point saying, you dragged us into this mess. And it all fell apart. At some point, that's going to be said to the neocons. What, you did this, and look how it turned out. But the thing about it is, so here they are, and many of us for years have said, it doesn't make sense. I don't see how Ukraine can beat Russia. You know, they're going to lose. And what the neocons, you know, it's like they didn't really have a plan. One of my favorite lines was in the movie Tremors, where they came up with a plan and it didn't work, and the monsters are coming after them and they're running, and one guy looks, well, before they run, their plan falls apart, and one of the guys looks at the other guy and he says, what's the plan? And the other guy says, run it. He looks at him, he says, running ain't a plan. Running is what you do when a plan don't work, right? That's where we are. What the Ukraine conflict ended up being, interestingly enough, is it's what you do when a plan don't work. Because the plan was the economic sanctions going to wipe Russia out, because of course, as we all know, it's just a country, a gas station masquerading as a country with people who are ignorant genetically and mentally and emotionally inferior and technologically inferior, so they couldn't win. And economically, they were going to be crushed, and there we go. And then Putin's going to fall. When that didn't happen, they didn't have a plan. It was like the opposite of a plan. What do we do now? So it became, let's just put out the latest fire. What the hell? They're Ukrainian lives, they ain't ours. So let's figure out ways to waste them. You know, hey, let's come up with a plot. I got an idea. We'll invade Kursk. What's the worst going to happen? We could lose 30,000 men. Yeah, they're Ukrainians. Yeah, so that ain't all that bad. I think there's more. We'll just lower the age for recruits and bring in 18-year-olds, and we'll get another 30,000, right? Oh, we'll do an invasion of some dam, attack the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, whatever the hell. We'll just keep doing things and wasting away the lives of Ukrainians, because they're very much expendable to the neocons. So there they go. And they just kind of piddled away the last couple of years, trying to keep the fire going at all costs. You know, kind of like somebody at night and they're caught in a blizzard trying to survive. And it's like, whatever you do, don't let the fire go out. Because if the fire goes out, we'll freeze to death. It's the only thing keeping us alive outside in this blizzard. And we're stuck in the woods camping, right? You got to keep water. You got to keep putting wood on that fire. If the fire goes out, you're dead. And they knew, well, as long as the Ukraine conflict's going on, we're okay. We can kind of keep making excuses. So the fire on the wood was Ukrainian bodies. And of course, it was I mean, the fire, the wood on the fire was Ukrainian bodies, and of course, it was money and weapon supplies, etc. Right? I saw something the other day where, interestingly enough, and this is going to be part of this discussion, or at least relevant, where Jake Sullivan was talking, and he was saying something about how the U.S. military had gotten down to a very poor state, and it was going to take a long time and a lot of money to rebuild it. And I thought to myself, I think he's saying that because when the Trump people come in and the Pentagon talk to him and they say, guys, yeah, let me explain to where we are right now. After 4 years of Biden and all this craziness, we're out of missiles, we're out of guns, we're out of rounds, bullets, canteens, boots, we're out of everything. Everything's broke, nothing works. We are in an absolute disastrous, calamitous, catastrophic situation here militarily. I suspect Trump's coming in and the military is going to say, and he's going to say, how's the military looking? They're going to say catastrophic. That's a good word. Cataclysmic. They'll be using words like that. Right. Basically, right now, if the Navajo Nation was to remount, we'd probably lose to them because we're all out of everything. We'd be fighting with sticks and, we'd be fighting with bows and arrows at this point. I think those are the kind of things that Trump's going to hear. I think he's going to hear those kinds of things about the budget. Hey, how's the budget looking? Well, you don't really want to know, Don. They've been hiding it for the last couple of years. But we're $90 trillion in debt. Oh, my God. National debt. No, that's just the White House budget alone. We haven't even gotten to the rest of the government. Yeah, I'm telling you. Catastrophe awaits Donald Trump, right? So my point is this. They've been pumping life into this skeleton. You know what I mean? It's plugged in and it's barely a breathing body. It's on what do they do? It's on chemically induced coma, things of that nature. That's what Ukraine is. And worse than that, it's a sponge. See, they got a problem. Even if the war ends, maybe a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is that if the war ends, and it's coming to an end, I do think that if it ends, then information gets out about what happened. And might I add, Ukraine does not have an economy. Who's going to feed all the Ukrainians? What the infrastructure? Who's going to rebuild that? Who's going to pay? Who's going to do all that? The Russians ain't going to do it. They're not going to do it. They're going to say, "Hey, we got part of it, and in order to get a deal, you had to recognize our part of it. We're going to rebuild our part. And by the way, our part has wheat fields and all kind of mines, coastal cities with ports. Thanks." They're going to walk away with the choice loins of Ukraine, and you have a bunch of Ukrainians looking at the EU, going, "We're hungry. And you just wiped out our whole country, so you got to feed us." Whoo! I won't be in that position if I was in the EU. You know why? Because if you're a ruler in the EU, in Germany, for instance, your people are looking at you saying the exact same thing. You got millions of Germans going, "Hey, what?" It's like that Ukrainian guy. "We're hungry. And Volkswagen just laid us all off. We don't have any food. You gave them $70 billion to Ukraine the last couple of years. Can you help us out?" And on the other side, you're going to have Trump squeezing them like a grape. "Hey, you need to buy more U.S. gas and pay more for weapons." He ain't got no conscience to what he's going to do to the Europeans. He's going to squeeze their butts like a sponge, trying to get every drop out of them, right? And then, so that's the local problems. The U.S. and European militaries and economies are in tatters, and that ain't changing. But the bigger problem is this. And I got to go back to this. This was part of world domination and hegemony. That's what this was about. It was about the fall of the empire. This is how the empire is going to keep from falling. That's how it's going to keep from losing its power. It's going to take out Russia. It's going to then get all of the Russian leadership. It's then going to acquire all of Russia's land, control of it, control of Russia's natural resources, control the prices on the market. And now, I mean, let's face it, they don't have to go to war with China if they got Russia. because China needs so much of Russia's natural resources that they can just shut down China's economy by manipulating the price and the availability of natural resources to China to a point where China could not be competitive and they could take them out. And that's what they do. Unfortunately, didn't work. And they lost. And what are they going to lose? That's why this is like checkmate, dude. Checkmate the world. Because what do we got? We got the U.S. and their neocons versus the world. The U.S. empire saying, I got our grip on the world, and the world saying, get off me, get up off me, man, get off my back. And the U.S. saying, I ain't getting off your back. So now what do we have? So we've got this chess game going where the U.S. is trying to, like, we're going to do things in the Straits of the Taiwan Straits. We're going to take Ukraine out. Over here, we're using Israel to do this. And we got all of our bases in Africa, South America. Of course, we got to keep the CIA overthrowing governments there. Okay, we're busy, but we got a grip on the world as best we can. Well, that grip has been slowly slipping away, and it's going to slip real fast after the Ukraine conflict. A couple of reasons. Number one, you've turned Vladimir Putin into the hero of all parts of the world that you've screwed over. Any country that you've overthrown, any country that you've meddled in their internal affairs, which is pretty much all of them, right? Any country that has some kind of a historical animus towards imperialism, towards the colonial empires of Europe or the U.S. empire, any country like that, they're going to be looking at Putin saying, yay, you defeated them. You put them all together. And Putin, in his own way, not that he's the kind of brag, but let's face it, he's going to, I'll put it like that. He don't have to say it. I'll say it. U.S., you came with everything you had. You brought your boy Macron, old Rothschild Bank Macron. You bought one-eyed Pete Schultz, that lily-livered sack of manure. You brought Starmer and Bojo. You went through 3 or 4 of them. Liz Truss in the UK, all of them. Putin's going to be sitting there, and he ain't got to say it to the world, but the world's going to be like, dudes, you guys did you brought all of your leaders. Yes, this is your home. I mean, maybe that's a crude way to put it, but for traditional societies, you know what I mean when I say traditional societies, where, if you're from Hollywood, you call it the evil patriarchy or whatever. I just call it the world, right? And in traditional societies, in Africa, in Latin America, in the Middle East, in Asia, right? Where they have a more, shall we say, defined concept of femininity and masculinity, right? The concept, never stop ringing. The concept of masculinity in these societies, please text me to my buddy. The concept of masculinity will be personified or is personified by some kind of a physical duel, and which produces a victor and a loser, right? That's look. Study animals, wolves, right? Animals, chimpanzees. Animals have an alpha male. We're animals, and it ain't unusual to have an alpha male, right? And unlike Hollywood, it's not going to be a diverse group of strong females. It's going to be somebody like Putin, whoever. Yeah, Trump, who the hell ever. Bojo, I don't know, maybe not Bojo, but somebody. Ain't going to be an alpha male with hair like that. I'll tell you that right now. But, he looks like a reject from like a 1980s, British West End pop group. You know what I mean? With that hair. But bottom line I'm saying is this. I know, Africans know, Middle Easterns know, everybody's going to look at the U.S. empire. They're going to look at Putin. They're going to look back at the U.S. empire. They're going to say, don't even talk to me. Don't even talk to me. That guy kicked your ass. Nope. I have nothing to say to you. You're soft. He ain't. You came after him. The guy said, leave me alone. I don't want any trouble. But no, you couldn't listen. You had to be froggy, right? That's the way they're going to see it. The man asked you to leave him alone. It's like one of these movies, right? Where the guy's a kung fu master and some people are picking, old man. Of course, their mouths, aren't with the words, old man, you must give us your coins, right? The old karate movies. I'm dating myself. And you know, the old man says, "Go away, young man. I have no qualms with you." And he takes his, he starts to walk away. "Old man, you must give us that money." And they push him. The old man says, "Be gone, young man, for what you do is wrong." And at some point they pounce on the old guy and he beats the living shit out of every one of them. He mercilessly, he's a master, he effortlessly, they swing at him and he glides to one side and pivots and pushes this guy, and he does this beautiful kung fu and he just kicks them around and beats them all mercilessly, and they're all out, conked out, and then he just picks up his cane and continues to walk, and he's out. Right? And everybody looks at it and says, "Yeah, you guys probably need to leave that old dude alone. Don't mess with him," right? Well, that's where Putin's going to be. I mean, I don't know. I mean, if I'm some kind of a geopolitical analyst, I go a lot deeper than that, but I ain't. I'm just a regular guy, right? And for a regular guy, what does it come across like? Oh man, you stepped up to that dude. You threatened him. He's like, "Yo, man, I don't want no trouble." "Yeah, but kick your ass." We've all seen that in a bar, right? People are drinking or hanging out. "Hey, man, hey, dude, I don't want to." "Oh, yeah, you're a punk, man." Ah! And sooner or later, the drunken idiot goes over and takes a swipe at the other guy, and he gets his ass kicked. And everybody's like, "We tried to tell you there, cuz. We tried to tell you to keep your hands to yourself, but you had to be a badass. Now look at you, got your ass kicked." And they take him home, and they get him together, and he wakes up the next morning. "Oh, what happened?" "You got your ass kicked in the bar last night, dude." That's the simple side of it, right? That's where we are to these dudes in the Middle East. And so Trump's going to come in. Now, I think what Trump's going to try to do, to be frank, is deflect that. I think what Trump's trying to do, and as crazy as it could be, not as the U.S. empire, because the U.S. empire got chumped, right? But under Biden, the neocons, I think Trump is going to try to disassociate himself and the U.S. empire from that. I think what Trump's going to do is his plan. Okay, we can talk about it. It's be complicated, but I think Trump's plan, believe it or not, and I'm not saying it'll work, is to say that last 4 years, these people, the whole multi-gender thing and all that crap, that ain't America. I'm back. America's back. And I got a bunch of real tough guys with me. And we're going to go back to being real men and not these, these people were a joke. They're idiots. They're lunatics. And so he's going to try his best to disassociate America, his administration, and subsequently America from the Biden people and the neocons, which can't really be done in the world because, let's face it, dude, the world understands America. And he's even going to have a struggle doing that. But whatever the case, he's trying to go in a different direction, I think. Trump is more like this. And this is the way I put it. He's a different kind of imperialist, neocon, whatever you call. Trump now is threatening Panama. That's Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't want a war with Russia right now. Donald Trump doesn't want a war with China. And I'll tell you this, Donald Trump doesn't want a war with Iran. A lot of people say, "Oh, he's going to attack Iran." I don't believe it for a second. If they attack Iran, it'll be before Trump comes in, because I don't think Trump wants it. Trump, I don't think, wants a war, a major war. Trump wants to push around little countries like Nicaragua. See, that's the sad thing about it is Trump's one of those kind of bullies. He doesn't want to fight somebody his own size. He wants to push around the little guys. And I also believe this, being that he is of authoritarian kind of mindset, right? He has been convinced that Xi and those guys are authoritarians, which I don't necessarily see them as that at all. I think that's the propaganda, the U.S. propaganda. I don't believe it. I don't agree. Everybody's an authoritarian, but the guy who tried to declare martial law and take over the country of South Korea, the U.S. can't see fit to call him an authoritarian. But a guy in Russia who got 87% of the vote in a legitimate vote, that guy's an authoritarian. A guy in China where over 90% of the people in China approve of the government. But that guy's an authoritarian. Okay? I don't buy it a bit. But I'm just saying, I think Trump sees them as strong men. Let's not use the word authoritarian, as tough guys, strong, old-fashioned strong men who are in charge. And I think there's a certain a peer kind of admiration, to be frank, that Trump has for them. And when I mean a peer admiration, I mean, like, you ever watch one of these movies and there's generals on the other side of the military, and at some point they have to meet and they have great respect for each other. They're fighting and their armies are fighting, but these two generals have great respect. You're a general, I'm a general. I know what it takes to be a general. I know what you're doing. I know what you're up against. Hey, let me tell you something. I respect you. They don't say it, but there's that respect among peers, right? And I think that's the way, to me, I believe that's how Trump actually sees Putin. I think that's how he sees Xi. I think that's how he sees Kim. I think that's how he sees these people, as strong, tough guys like him. He even said they're bad hombres. Bad hombres. He didn't mean that in a bad way. He meant that in a good way. Just like me, I'm a bad hombre. So we're a bunch of bad hombres. The bad hombres can get along. We can figure it out. You know what? In fact, he'd probably be happy sitting in a room with these guys, you know, talking, having lunch, talking about how tough they are and how many people they rule. And I tell people to stand and they will stand. And I tell them to sit and they sit. See, that's the kind of things Trump wants to do. That's where he is. That's his dream. He's a tough guy. But I'm reading more and more. Trump's apparently he talked to Viktor Orban from Hungary. Apparently, Robert Fico, Slovakia, which is interesting because Orban's a conservative, which goes to show that the mainstream people try to say everybody's an extremist or a nutcase or can't get along who doesn't agree with them. Well, Robert Fico is an old-fashioned socialist, pretty unabashed about a left socialist. He's the head of Slovakia, but he believes in Slovakia. Viktor Orban is an old-fashioned conservative, and he's in Hungary. And you know what? They're the best of friends, and they're trying to work together for the betterment of their countries. Imagine that. Imagine people smart enough to do that. Just goes to show maybe a lot of Americans could learn something from that. Anyway, so my point is, so Trump apparently spoke with Orban and then Fico goes to Moscow, and apparently they haven't released, they talked for some time and they didn't release the transcripts of what was said. So, of course, apparently in my research, it appears that, they talked about energy and things that have to do with necessary economic, connections between the two countries, which of course, look, let's face it, Slovakia, you're on the border of a world superpower, of a world power. You want to keep things going. That's good for your economy. He's smart enough to figure that out, right? And of course, you got Ukraine trying to cut off oil, gas pipelines and stuff like that to Slovakia, Hungary, whoever they can, whoever they're mad at. So I'm sure some of that needed to be discussed. But you have to suspect at this point that Trump and Orban talked, that Orban and Fico talked, and that when Fico went to Moscow, that there was a discussion of some of the things that could be considered and some of the directions they could go. Let's not forget, look, this wouldn't be the first time. Nixon did it. I mean, what's his name? We know Reagan did it. We have people who do in fact, who was it else? Was it Nixon that did it? There are numerous people who were running for president or waiting to be put in office after they'd won, who started doing foreign policy informally before that. So it appears to me, I'm not going to say Donald Trump's doing foreign policy informally, but I'm saying he's talking to people and a conversation has started amongst the Trump political sphere in Europe. Because in Europe, the center of NATO is going to move. Right now, it's been really in two places. To be quite frank, it's been in Poland and it's been in Britain. But actually, it's been in Britain, and the Poles are just some other lackeys hoping to lick their master's boots enough that they'll, get an opportunity to get a little closer to the king. But at any rate, that's going to change. It's going to change to Hungary and Slovakia, actually. How is that hilarious? But at any rate, so I think what we're looking at is the reality that Trump is setting himself up. I don't know that he can get out of it. I'll put it like this. People think the Russians want to be in this war forever. I think if the Russians could find a reasonable way to end it in a way that would neutralize the long-term threat, that's the key, to end it and neutralize the long-term threat. I think they'd be willing to wiggle a little bit. They're not going to take a deal that's going to put them in jeopardy 5 years from now. But I think the Russians would probably, quite frankly, if you look at the history of Putin and Lavrov, I will guarantee you this. They already know exactly what they will take. They already know exactly where they'll go, whether or not they go, and where they'll go, what they'll take, what it'll take. They got it set out. The Russians, they're very, very organized like that. And, the history of the Soviet Union, they're extremely bureaucratic. So they have several alternatives that they can, probably a number of alternatives that they can take. And if they get the opportunity to end the conflict, I think they will, because not only does the U.S. have other plans, the Russians has other plans. They got a lot of economic plans, and I think to end this conflict would allow the Russians to enact some of their economic plans. Plus, when never start a fight, and when you learn self-defense, that's what you learn. Never start a fight, because you don't know how it's going to end. Some guy threatening you, I'll punch you, walk away. Why? Okay, let's just say you say to yourself, well, I'm well able to defend myself, and he's not. I'm trained to defend myself, and he's not. So the guy comes up and he gets too close, and you just beat him up. Or he says something or whatever, things go too far, you beat the hell out of the guy, right? What happens if you accidentally hit him and he falls and hits his head and dies? And now you've killed someone. You've got that on your conscience, and you've got to deal with the legal ramifications of possibly going to jail for murder, manslaughter, whatever the case may be, reckless disregard for human life. It could be economic catastrophe for you. Who needs that? Aren't you better off to walk away? What happens if you defeat the guy and he comes back later and shoots at you and misses you and hits your mother, sister, brother, wife, child, anything, right? You can't control what can happen. So if you have an ongoing conflict or potential for a conflict, one of the things you learn in self-defense is they can't hit you if you ain't there. Get out of it. So being that the Russians are pretty smart, taking into account that they have to neutralize any future threats, I think starting by saying Ukraine won't be in NATO and will recognize the new territories. If you can really get into the ground floor of the Russians right there. And I think you really have to get rid of the sanctions. But believe it or not, all of the sanctions aren't as important, because the sanctions have really caused the Russian economy to thrive. But I think the Russians don't want them, just as a matter of principle. So I think Trump really, come on, I could be his negotiator. Donald Trump, President Garland, Envoy Nixon, I want you to talk to the Russians. I say, before I go, let me explain something. There ain't no point in me going if you ain't going to say no to NATO. If you ain't going to say we recognize all of your regions, we're recognizing everything, we recognize all of it. At the UN, wherever, we recognize it. And no to NATO, recognize all the regions, get rid of the sanctions. We do all those things, we can get a deal. That's what I tell them. I say, if I ain't going there with that. Now, you can tell me, okay, go in with 2 of the 3 or 1 of the 3 as the starting, and I can go in there and I can work with that. But I'm going to tell you right now, I ain't getting out there without a deal without those 3 things. We can go and I can fight and I can scrap. Not those 3 things. Russians ain't calling off the dogs, brother. That's where we are. But here's the other part of it that could be of consequence that people are really taking into account. Trump hates Zelensky. He hates him. He despises Zelensky. And Trump is a guy that if he don't like you, he ain't doing nothing for you. And might I add, how do you think he feels about Keir Starmer? They just sent this new guy that they picked to send over to talk to Trump. Bad move. He hates all of them. Right? He hates Macron. He hates every stinking one of them. He hates all of he hates the new Jaguar ad. I don't even know if he's saying it, but I'm just saying that whole thing. He hates all of it. He hates them and everything they stand for. And I think that Trump feels that they have burdened him with something. and he wants to get it off his back. I think, this is my opinion, you could think I'm wrong. I think Trump sees, not only that, let's not forget, Trump made a phone call and said, hey, I think Biden, he's up to no good in Ukraine. And they impeached him for it. And he was right. And the Ukrainians helped him. Recall this, he sent his boy Giuliani over to Ukraine to try to figure out what was going on. And the US charged Giuliani with crimes over that and really economically destroyed it, right? So Ukraine has been nothing but trouble for him. And oh, how about this? I think he's figured out by now that MI6 was involved in Operation Let's Take Trump Out in 2016 up until now. So Donald Trump is not in the mood to try to bail these people out. I think he sees Ukraine as a monkey on his back and he wants it off. And I think as far as Donald Trump is concerned, he'd give the Russians what they want tomorrow. He'd be like, hey, we want out. Putin would say, yeah, we ain't too thrilled about this either. Trump would say, what do you need? You think you can give me neutrality? Get rid of the sanctions. And I don't know, how about you recognize all the new territories? Trump would be like, really, is that all? Yeah. I tell you what I'll do. I'll send you a couple Trump ties too. We got some new colors to just come out. Made in Shanghai. They're absolutely fantastic. Silk ties. Putin would be like, silk ties it is. Boom. There you go. Right. Somebody says Trump wanted NATO more funding from his first term. Yeah, listen, understand about Trump. He's always going to ask you for more money. I don't care what it is. The foundation of Donald Trump is give us more money. The foundation of Trump is how can we take advantage of you economically? That's what Europe has to look forward to. Biden wiped you out with his policies. Biden destroyed you with his policies, right? And so he made policies that were going to deindustrialize you. Trump, you just take your money. Trump will just look at you, reach in your pocket, pull your wallet out, remove all the money out of it, kindly give you your wallet, and deposit that money in his pocket. That's what he's going to do. Of course, he wants more money from NATO. They got to buy stuff from us. What else is he saying right now? Hey, guys, Trump is saying this. You need to buy more gas and oil from the U.S. That's his game. Trump is going to soak you for every penny he's got. You got, and then some. He's much less likely inclined to drag you into a war. But he is likely inclined to rob you for every sneaking penny you got and then come back for more. That's what Trump's going to do, Europe. Now, let's see. This guy, so C Drive says, Putin has to give Trump something he says he needs, but really doesn't. So Trump can say he doesn't give Putin everything he wants. Oh, yeah, of course. I agree with you. You're right. They have to create, I'll put it like this, and I think the Russians understand that. In order to get a deal. And I'm not even saying, look, don't say have anybody said, Garland said they're definitely going to get a deal. I'm just throwing this out there. They understand that when it comes to, when it comes to international politics, everybody has to walk away and be able to go home and say they're a winner. You don't have to be a winner. You got to be able to go home and convince your people that you're a winner. And let's not forget that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, what happened? The U.S. agreed to take missiles out of Turkey. And therefore, the Russian leader could go home and say, I won. No, in fact, they agreed to keep it quiet, but he won. He got a win. And JFK, the American leader, could say, hey, we won. We got the Russians out. Everybody could walk away a winner. So I think the Russians realized that they got to give Trump some kind of face-saving thing. I do think this, though. Trump has this advantage because it ain't his war, and he's coming in saying, I won out. Just getting out of it, he wins. Just getting out of it. There are a lot of people on YouTube. There are a lot of people, who are talking, who've got everywhere, watching YouTube, whatever. There are a lot of people who have been shivering, waiting for the nukes to turn them into ash for the last several years, that are going to breathe a sigh of relief. And probably me and everybody else in the chat also, right? So I'll put it to you like this. I just think that we are in a situation where we have an opportunity to get out where it wouldn't exist because we have a president who feels like it ain't his and he don't want it. He don't want it. He doesn't want that one. I ain't going to say about other conflicts, but that's one it's clear he doesn't want. And there are people saying, I always glance through the chat and somebody's like, I don't know why you think Trump did this, and I don't know why you think Trump's going to be able to accomplish anything. I don't know. I don't know. But one thing is obvious. He don't want to be in Ukraine. Another thing is obvious based on the op-ed that was written by RFK Jr. and Donald Trump Jr. He knows what the hell's going on in Ukraine. He knows the stakes, and he has concerns about World War III and nuclear war the same as we do. And if you're a person who has that concerns, you want to get the hell out of that fight with you, of anything with Russia. So I think he does. Again, we don't know, but I'm throwing out scenarios. I'm going to guess. I think he finds a way out. But I could be wrong. But that's a guess. That's what I'm leaning. 51%. How about we go with this? Now I'm going to go 53.732% that he finds a way out. It's a little better than it is a little better than 50-50. We'll go 53-47 that he finds a way out. So I don't know, but he might not. I'll put it like this. One thing I can guarantee you, Trump ain't digging holes deeper in that war. Trump's not going to go in and say, yeah, let's, knuckle down and let's, plant our feet and stand up against Putin and fire more missiles. That's not happening. He's looking to go the other direction. So we'll see. Look, you know what? I'll say this. I've said this before. The stakes are so high. And the neocons are so brutish and violent and sociopathic and psychopathic. I ain't 100% sure that Donald Trump's ever going to see the presidency. I'm not 100% sure that Donald Trump will ever become president, that they will let that happen. I'll believe it. I don't know that it ain't going to happen, but I'll believe it when I see it. Now, as for Donald Trump has said that he wants to end the wars in the Middle East, and he wants to end the war in Ukraine. That's what he said. I don't always go by what Donald Trump says. More often than not, I don't. But the other thing is this: if he does, I will applaud it. We're gonna see what happens. I would applaud it. I hope he does end the wars. And he said something about he wanted to end the wars. You can look it up. So go search it. End the wars in the Middle East. And he said, now listen to this. And he might be right. He said, I think it'll be easier to end the war in the Middle East than it will the one in Ukraine. That's what Donald Trump said, which tells me he kind of understands things, because all they got to do is stop arming Israel. They can end that one. And because they got so much driving them around the world, and even in Europe saying you got to end this. So he can end that. The problem is that in order to end the war in Ukraine, he's got to go to war with the neocons here and in Europe. So that's going to be tough, not because the Russians are so tough, but because the stakes are right now. The U.S. loses what vestige it has, the veneer, right, of hegemony, of world domination is gone. As soon as they sign that deal, as soon as that deal is done, Donald Trump walks away and everybody looks at it and says, it's official. You lost the war. Now, Donald Trump can validly say, I didn't lose shit. Okay, these idiots screwed America and put us in a bad situation. And to some extent, he'll be right. My point being, I can point to some things that he did to create the environment for this to happen. He was arming Ukraine. He was doing all kinds of stuff. He didn't know the hell. Yeah, I think Donald Trump understood foreign policy. I don't know how much he understands it now at times. But my point is, he had a hand in this mess. But of course, he ain't going to ever live up to that. But, believe that. But I do think that he's going to play that it's not mine. I solved the problem that was created by someone else. And it may, to be honest, I kind of think it'll fly here. If he gets the deal, I think it'll fly. Because people went out so many people went out of the war so bad. But I think overseas, people foresee it what it is. We'll see it for what it is. They'll see around Donald Trump to an entire empire and say the empire, Donald Trump, not you, but the empire that you're now sitting atop of some kind of way, whether you're steering it or not. You're sitting on top of this thing. You're in the pilot seat. You're on the bridge, not in the brig. They tried to put him in the brig, but you're on the bridge, and you're running this empire. And this empire made a bad move and lost. So how he tries to recover from that, I don't know. With the internal problems we have, I think Donald Trump wants to focus on internal stuff. I don't know what he's going to do. I think that's what he wants. So after that, here's the other part of it. I believe that what's going on now, the Biden administration has been so dangerous, and Dr. Mohammed Marandi was talking about it the other day. I think the world, the Chinese, the Russians, the Iranians, the Venezuelans, you name it, are saying these people are lunatics and they want to attack us all, and we got to come together to defend ourselves. The Russians just mentioned that 9 more countries, I think they said 9 more countries are going to be allowed into BRICS. Do I have that here? I don't see it. I don't see it here, but it's around. At any rate, you can look it up. So the Russians have said, I think 9 more countries want to join BRICS. I don't know. But at any rate, it's out there. You can find it. So bottom line is, I'll end up by saying, or get towards the end by saying this, the Russians and the Chinese, I think when this conflict is over, they'll come together very tightly. And they'll say, look, they will integrate significant parts of their military. No, I don't mean integrate so that they're not independent countries. I mean the ability to fight defensively together and offensively. And I think at that point, it'll be like, okay, we're not putting up with this anymore. You know, you came after the Russia and you disrupted the world. And now you think you're just going to come after China and disrupt the world. And I think you're going to see a number of countries make it clear to the US, look, you come after China, you're fighting us all. It's time to end this stuff. And I think we're going to have such military problems, such problems, so many problems. Here's what I think. When Trump comes in, they're going to tell him how bad this military is. I don't know if you know, but apparently the Houthis in Yemen shot down a friggin' F-18 the other day. The U.S. is saying they didn't. The U.S. is like, no. It was, we accidentally did it with a friendly fire. It is possible, but extremely unlikely. Not only that, the U.S. historically, U.S. military does not admit friendly fire incidents because it's very embarrassing, right? But they said, no, we accidentally shot our own jet down. I don't think so. Houthis have shot down a whole lot of MQ-9 Reapers, and I think they finally got their mitts on an F-18 Hornet. And apparently they hit the ship that the Hornet was taking off from. So they're, kicking ass and taking names over there. All right, let's take a look. And we always have some great questions with the super chats, and we're going to get
Kofi, follow me.